Greetings, road warriors. Tonight, our chronicle covers the Great Constriction, the dusty gateway that separates the scorching Mojave from the cool allure of the Pacific. We are turning our headlights toward the high desert, rolling gently onto the asphalt ribbon that threads the needle between two massive tectonic giants. We are heading into the Cajon Pass. The engine is humming a steady, low-frequency lullaby, the kind that vibrates right up through the seat and settles into your bones, letting you know that the machine is happy and the oil pressure is good. The cab is warm, a cozy capsule of amber dashboard lights floating in the vast, inky darkness of Southern California. Let's be honest, finding that perfect temperature where you aren't freezing from the AC or sweating from the heater is an art form more complex than backing a set of doubles around a blind corner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're currently parked at a truck stop, idling in a rest area, or just listening from the comfort of your own bed, go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. I always like to see where the convoy's resting tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The truck rolls forward, the tyres singing against the pavement. Before we talk about the asphalt, the way stations, or the distinct hiss of air brakes, we have to look much deeper. We have to look at the bones of this place. Long before there were wheels or wagons, before there were even human feet to tread the dust, the Cajon Pass was being constructed by the violent, silent hands of the earth itself. Tonight, we aren't just driving over a hill, we are driving through a wound. To the untrained eye, driving north on Interstate 15 feels like simply driving uphill. But if you look out the side window as the city lights of San Bernardino fade into the rear view, you realize you're entering a colossal pinch point. To your left, the dark, brooding silhouette of the San Gabriel Mountains rises like a fortress wall. To your right, the equally imposing bulk of the San Bernardino Mountains stands guard. These aren't just random piles of rock. They are brothers, separated at birth by one of the most famous geological features on the planet, the San Andreas Fault. It's strange to think about geology when you're hauling 40,000 pounds of consumer electronics, but the ground beneath the tyres is telling a story of immense power. The reason this pass exists, the reason we don't have to drive hundreds of miles out of our way to get from the desert to the ocean, is because the Earth here is broken. Millions of years ago, the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate decided to have a disagreement right where we are driving. Usually mountain ranges in North America run north to south. Think of the Rockies or the Cascades. But here, the transverse ranges decided to be nonconformist. They run east to west, creating a massive wall that traps the smog and the heat in the Los Angeles basin. It's like the Earth decided to build a retaining wall but then realized it needed a back door. That back door is the Cajon Pass. The San Andreas Fault slices diagonally through this junction, grinding the rock into a fine, unstable paste. Geologists, those folks who find excitement in staring at gravel for hours, tell us that the friction here has pulverized the granite and schist over eons. This weakened rock was softer than the surrounding peaks, allowing wind and rain to scour it out more easily than the hard granite on the peaks. Essentially, the fault line chewed the food, and the weather swallowed it, leaving behind this saddle, a natural corridor sitting at roughly 3,037 feet at its highest point. As the rig powers up the initial incline, the engine note deepening, you can almost feel that tension in the landscape. The steep walls of what is known as Blue Cut loom in the shadows. This is a specific section of the pass where the fault is exposed. The rock here isn't the solid, reassuring grey of a granite countertop. It's a chaotic, twisted mess of green and grey Pelona schist. It looks tortured, bent by pressures we can't even comprehend. If rocks could go to therapy, these ones would be booked solid for the next millennium. There is a heaviness to the air here, distinct from the coastal breeze below or the dry heat waiting above. It's the smell of sagebrush and dust, mixed with the metallic tang of hot brakes and diesel exhaust. Imagine the sheer timescale. We get impatient when the fuel pump flows a little slower than usual, tapping our fingers on the steering wheel. But the San Gabriel Mountains have been rising for about 5 million years, inching up at a rate that makes a traffic jam on the I-405 look like light speed. They are still rising, in fact. Every time a tremor hits, the mountains grow a tiny bit taller, and the pass gets squeezed a tiny bit tighter. Driving through here at night, You feel small. The headlights cut a cone of clarity into the darkness, illuminating the scrub oak and the yucca plants that cling to the steep slopes. These plants are tough survivors, roots dug deep into that fractured rock, holding the hillsides together against gravity. It's a harsh environment. During the day, the sun beats down on the pale rocks, reflecting heat until the air shimmers. But tonight, under the cool gaze of the moon, the canyon feels dormant. It's a deceptively peaceful feeling. The landscape looks static, frozen in time, but underneath the 18 wheels, two massive slabs of the Earth's crust are slowly grinding past each other. The Pacific Plate is moving northwest, taking Los Angeles and San Diego with it, while the rest of the continent stays put. It moves about as fast as your fingernails grow, roughly 2 inches a year. It doesn't sound like much, but give it a few million years, and San Francisco will be a suburb of Los Angeles. Though knowing California real estate prices, the rent will still be too high. The geography dictates everything here. The pass acts as a funnel. It's not just a funnel for cars and trucks, it's a funnel for weather, for history, and for energy. The distinct shape of the canyon, narrowing as it climbs, creates a venturi effect. It accelerates the wind, channels the fog, and forces every traveller into the same narrow path. There is a specific spot near the bottom of the pass where the separation between the ranges is most obvious. If you were to stop the truck, not that you should, unless you want an angry highway patrol officer knocking on your door, and walk out into the scrub, you'd find rocks that don't belong together. You'd find a piece of granite that originated hundreds of miles south sitting next to a piece of sandstone that belongs hundreds of miles north. The pass is a geological blender. The grade begins to stiffen now. You can feel the transmission thinking about a downshift. The sensation of gravity pulls at the back of the trailer. It's a reminder that despite all our horsepower and torque, we're still subject to the laws of physics. We are climbing out of the immense bowl of the Los Angeles basin. In the trucking world, we talk a lot about the grapevine further north, and rightly so, but the Cajon Pass has a steeper average grade in certain sections. It demands respect. The tectonic forces that built this place didn't care about the maximum slope a diesel engine can handle without overheating. They just push the earth up and let the chips fall where they may. As the truck labours upward, the darkened slopes reveal layers of strata, stripes of white and tan rock glowing faintly in the moonlight. These are ancient riverbeds and seabeds, lifted thousands of feet into the air. It's a bit ironic, really. We are driving vehicles made of steel and plastic, burning ancient fossilised plants, driving over ancient fossilised seafloors, all to deliver a load of flat-screen TVs to Las Vegas. The circle of life is weirdly industrial. The shadows play tricks on the eyes in this canyon. A jagged boulder might look like a crouching animal. A twisty Joshua tree might look like a hitchhiker waving a hand. It's the kind of terrain that breeds legends. You can understand why the indigenous people and early explorers looked at these towering walls and felt a sense of awe. They weren't just crossing a hill, they were transitioning between worlds. Below us, deep in the bedrock, the groundwater is squeezed by the fault lines, pushed up to the surface to create natural springs. These springs are the only reason anyone could survive the journey in the old days. Water in the desert is more precious than gold, and certainly more useful than a load of unassigned freight, sitting on a dock. The geology didn't just create the gap, it provided the life support system for crossing it. The climb continues, the drone of the tyres changing pitch as the asphalt surface changes texture. We are moving deeper into the throat of the pass. The city lights are gone now, blocked by the ridgelines. It's just us, the road, and the ancient stones. The separation between the San Gabriels and the San Bernardinos is a testament to the violence of the earth, but tonight it serves a peaceful purpose. It allows the flow of commerce, the movement of people, and the solitary journey of the night driver. We are tracing the scar of the planet, riding the seam of the world. It is a place of immense geological drama, silent and slumbering in the dark, waiting for the sun to rise and bake the stones once again. But for now, the fault sleeps, and the wheels keep turning. The modern highway, with its reflective markers and smooth curves, gives us a false sense of being the first to conquer this landscape. We sit high in our air ride seats, surrounded by satellite navigation and digital logs, feeling like masters of the terrain. But if you roll down the window and let the night air swirl into the cab, you might catch a whisper of the past. Long before the rumble of the Jake brake echoed off these canyon walls, there was the soft thud of moccasins on dust. The Cajon Pass was never just a gap in the rocks, it was a doorway. For the indigenous peoples of this region, the Serrano to the east and the Tongva and Tataviam to the west, this corridor was a vital lifeline. They didn't see a choke point or a logistical hurdle, they saw a trade route. Picture the canyon without the concrete. No lanes, no guardrails, no buzzing streetlights, just the chaparral, the sage, and a narrow winding footpath beaten into the earth by generations of travellers. These early traders were the original long haulers. They didn't carry bills of lading, but their cargo was just as precious. From the coast, the Tongva would carry seashells, dried fish, and soapstone. From the interior deserts, the Serrano and Mojave peoples brought obsidian, salt, and deer hides. They met here, in the shadow of the Great Peaks, exchanging goods that would eventually make their way hundreds of miles in every direction. The pass was a prehistoric marketplace, a hub of commerce long before Amazon built a distribution center in San Bernardino. The path they used wasn't a single, straight line. It followed the path of least resistance, tracing the dry creek beds and the ridges where the footing was sure. They knew where the water springs bubbled up from the fault lines. Remember those springs we mentioned? And they knew where the grizzly bears liked to ambush unwary travellers. Yes, grizzlies. It's hard to imagine now looking at the dry scrub, but California used to be grizzly country. Running into one of those on a narrow trail would definitely ruin your schedule. Then came the strangers. In the late 1700s, the Spanish Empire was stretching its long, dusty fingers north from Mexico. They were obsessed with connecting their missions along the coast with their settlements in the interior. They needed an overland route, a way to move cattle, soldiers, and the Catholic faith across the formidable barrier of the mountains. Pedro Fages, a Spanish military commander with a reputation for being tough as old leather, is often credited as one of the first Europeans to scout the area in 1772. He was chasing deserters from the Spanish army, which, let's be honest, if you were wearing wool uniforms in the California desert summer, deserting probably seemed like a solid career move. Fages didn't exactly map the pass for a freeway, but he noted the gap in the mountains. But the real game changer came a few decades later with a man named Jedediah Smith. Now, Smith was a mountain man in the truest sense. He didn't care about borders or permissions. In 1826, he led a party of trappers across the Mojave Desert, a feat that was considered practically suicidal at the time. They were dehydrated, exhausted, and probably smelling ripe enough to knock a buzzard off a telegraph pole. When Smith stumbled into the Cajon Pass, he wasn't just finding a way through the mountains, he was breaking the seal on California. He was the first American to enter California overland from the east. The Mexican authorities, who controlled California at the time, were not exactly thrilled to see him. They essentially asked to see his passport, and when he didn't have one, they politely but firmly told him to turn his mules around. But the secret was out. The wall had a gate. Following Smith came the pack trains. The old Spanish Trail, which sounds romantic but was actually a grueling 200-mile ordeal connecting Santa Fe, New Mexico to Los Angeles, utilized the Cajon Pass as its final leg. This wasn't a wagon road yet. It was too rough for wheels. It was the domain of the mule. Mules are the unsung heroes of transportation history. Stubborn, sure-footed, and tougher than a $2 steak, they could carry heavy loads over rocks that would snap a horse's leg. Thousands of mules were driven through this pass every year. They carried woolen blankets from New Mexico to trade for California horses and mules, which were then driven back east. It was a massive livestock exchange. Imagine the noise in the canyon back then. Instead of the steady drone of diesel engines, the air would have been filled with the braying of mules, the shouting of the arrieros, muleteers, and the clatter of hooves on stone. The dust would have hung in the air for days. One of the most specific and treacherous spots they had to navigate was a ridge near the top of the pass. It was a knife-edge trail where a single misstep meant tumbling down a steep ravine. The arrieros had to unpack the mules and carry the goods across by hand, then lead the frightened animals over one by one. It was the 19th century equivalent of a mandatory brake check area, but with much higher stakes. There is a human element here that often gets lost in the history books. These travellers were exposed. There were no truck stops with showers and hot coffee. They slept on the ground, wrapped in blankets, listening to the coyotes and watching the stars wheel overhead. They cooked beans over fires made of dried yucca stalks. They were vulnerable to the elements, to thirst and to bandits. Ah yes, bandits. The Cajon Pass was a perfect ambush point. The geography that funneled trade also funneled targets. A well-placed group of horse thieves could block the narrow trail, relieve the traders of their goods, and disappear into the labyrinth of canyons before the dust settled. It was the Wild West, literally. One of the most famous figures of this era was a Ute chief named Walkara. He was a master horse thief, the kind of guy who would steal your horse and then sell it back to you a week later. In the 1840s, he led raids through the Cajon Pass, sweeping up thousands of horses from the California ranchos and driving them back to Utah. He knew the pass better than anyone, using hidden slot canyons to move entire herds without being detected. He was the ghost of the Cajon, a legend that terrified the ranchers in the valley below. As we cruise up the grade today, comfortable in our climate-controlled cabs, we're passing right over their footprints. The modern alignment of Interstate 15 doesn't follow the exact path of the old Spanish Trail. The engineers straightened out the kinks, but it's close. Sometimes, if you look at the aerial maps, you can still see faint scars on the ridges, the eroded ruts where thousands of hooves wore the rock down. It's a humbling thought. We complain when traffic slows down to 40 miles per hour. These people were lucky to make 10 miles a day. They didn't have Jake brakes or power steering. They had grit, leather, and a desperate need to get to the other side. The transition from footpaths to mule trails marked the beginning of the Cajon Pass as a commercial artery. It proved that the mountains could be crossed, that the desert could be survived. It set the stage for everything that was to come. The mule trains widened the path, packing down the earth, preparing the way for the next revolution in transport. The dust from the mule trains had barely settled when the rumble of wheels began to approach. The era of the pack animal was fading. The era of the wagon was about to begin. And with the wagons came a new kind of traveller driven not just by trade but by faith and the promise of a new home. But that is a story for the next mile marker. For now, as we crest a small rise and the headlights sweep across the darkened scrub, tip your hat to the ghosts in the shadows. To the Tongva traders with their baskets, the Spanish soldiers in their heavy armour, and the dusty muleteers cursing their stubborn beasts. They broke the trail, were just following in their wake. The mules had proven it was possible. They had stamped a line into the dirt, a jagged signature across the mountains that said, "This way to the ocean." But for the heavy, lumbering dreams of the mid-19th century, a mule track wasn't enough. You couldn't float a family, a piano and a plough on the back of a donkey. The West needed wheels. Enter the era of the wagon, and more specifically the era of the Mormon Battalion. It was 1847. The Mexican-American War was winding down, and a group of Mormon soldiers discharged from the US Army in Los Angeles wanted to go home to Utah to rejoin their families. They had wagons, they had grit, and they had a serious problem. The Cajon Pass was still just a glorified goat path. When they reached the summit, looking down that steep, treacherous slope into the valley, most people would have turned around. The grade was brutal. We're talking about slopes that would make a modern runaway truck ramp look like a gentle driveway. But these men were engineers of necessity. They didn't have bulldozers, they had pickaxes and shovels. They widened the trail just enough to squeeze the wagons through. In some places, the drop-offs were so severe that they had to dismantle the wagons, lower the pieces down by rope, and reassemble them at the bottom. In other spots, they locked the wheels with chains and practically skied the wagons down the loose gravel. It was the 1847 version of off-roading, and it makes our complaints about potholes seem pretty trivial. But the real transformation came a few years later, in 1851. A massive wagon train of nearly 500 Mormon pioneers, led by Amasa Lyman and Charles Rich, arrived at the pass. They weren't just passing through, they were coming to stay. They had purchased the Rancho San Bernardino and were looking to build a settlement, a colony that would eventually become the city of San Bernardino. This wasn't a military unit. This was a migration. Men, women, children, livestock, and all their worldly possessions. The pass was the final exam before they could reach their promised land. They found the trail left by the battalion to be rough, washed out, and downright dangerous. So, they got to work. But this time, they weren't just clearing a path, they were building a road. There's a specific spot in the canyon known as Coyote Canyon. It's a narrow, twisting wash that bypasses the steepest ridge. The pioneers identified this as the key. They spent weeks moving boulders, filling in ruts, and hacking away the brush. It wasn't paved, obviously. It was dirt, rock, and hope. but it was wide enough for 2 wagons to pass, if the drivers were polite. The human element of this effort is staggering. Imagine the sound of iron rims grinding against granite, the snapping of wooden axles, the cries of children tired from weeks of travel. There's a story about a woman named Mary Ann trying to keep a milk cow calm while it slid down a shale slope, all while holding a baby. That's multitasking on a level that modern corporate culture can't even touch. Once the colony in San Bernardino was established, the pass became their lifeline to the outside world. But maintaining a road in this geology is a nightmare. The winter rains would turn the dirt to mud. The summer sun would bake it into concrete dust. It needed constant work. Enter John Brown. Not the abolitionist, but a local entrepreneur who saw an opportunity. In 1861, he formed a company to build a proper toll road through the pass. This was the first attempt to monetize the geography. If you wanted to cross the mountains without destroying your wagon, you had to pay the toll. Brown's road was a marvel for its time. It smoothed out the worst grades and actually had some semblance of drainage. He set up a toll gate at the lower end of the pass, right about where the modern truck scales sit today. The rates were specific. A wagon and 2 horses cost $1. A loose horse or cow was a few cents. Sheep were cheaper by the dozen. For the freight haulers of the 1860s, this toll was just the cost of doing business. These were the teamsters, in the literal sense, men who drove teams of horses or mules pulling massive freight wagons. They were hauling supplies to the mining camps in the high desert, to places like Cerro Gordo and the Calico Mountains. They carried machinery, whiskey, flour and dynamite up the hill, and brought silver and borax down. The 20 mule team borax wagons are the most famous image of this era, though they mostly operated further north in Death Valley. But similar rigs pounded the Cajon Pass. These were behemoths, 2 massive wagons hitched together, pulled by 18 mules and 2 horses, the wheelers right next to the wagon. The driver, or skinner, rode the near-wheeler horse and controlled the whole team with a single jerk line and a lot of creative profanity. Driving a 20-mule team through the Cajon Pass on a dirt toll road was an exercise in physics and terror. Going uphill was a slow, grueling slog, with the animals straining against the collars, their hooves slipping on the rocks. The skinner had to manage the whip, cracking it near the ears of the lead mules to guide them, never hitting them, just using the sound as a signal. Going downhill was worse. The wagons had rudimentary brakes, wooden blocks pressed against the iron tyres by a lever. On the steep grades of the Cajon, friction wasn't enough. The wooden blocks would smoke and catch fire. The skinner had to have a swamper, an assistant, jump off and throw rocks under the wheels or man the brake lever with all his weight. If the wagon gained too much momentum, it would overrun the mules, leading to a catastrophic pileup of wood, iron, and animal flesh. The toll road changed the economy of Southern California. It turned the pass from a barrier into a funnel for commerce. It allowed the silver from the desert mines to flow to the port of Los Angeles, fueling the early growth of the city. It was the 19th century equivalent of the I-15 logistics corridor. One of the most interesting technical details of this era was the drag. On the steepest descents, when the brakes weren't enough, teamsters would cut down a large tree or a heavy bundle of brush and chain it to the back of the wagon. The friction of the tree dragging in the dirt acted as an anchor, slowing the descent. It was crude, destructive to the road, and effective. You can imagine the toll road operator John Brown watching a teamster dragging a massive oak tree down his freshly graded road and tearing his hair out. The toll road operated for decades, a private enterprise controlling a public necessity. But as the population grew, the pressure for a free public road increased. Eventually the county took over, but the alignment established by Brown remained the backbone of travel through the pass for years. As we drive the modern highway, we glide over these struggles. The suspension absorbs the bumps, the retarder manages the speed, but every now and then, if you look down into the canyon floor, you might see a flat, overgrown bench of land cutting across a hillside. That's the ghost of the wagon road. It's a reminder that every mile we drive was paid for by someone else's sweat. The Mormon pioneers with their pickaxes, the toll road builders with their shovels, the teamsters with their cracked whips, they were the ones who tamed the grade. They took a geological accident and turned it into an economic artery. The wagons had conquered the pass, but they were slow. The world was speeding up. The Industrial Revolution was hungry for a faster way to move goods, a way that didn't rely on the muscle of a mule or the friction of a dragging log. The Iron Horse was coming, and the Cajon Pass, with its steep grades and twisting canyons, was about to present the railroad engineers with the challenge of a lifetime. The wagons had done their job. They had proven that goods could move through the gap, provided you had enough mules and enough patience. But by the late 19th century, patience was in short supply. The United States was in a hurry. The Golden Spike had been driven in Utah in 1869, connecting the east to the west, but Southern California was still somewhat isolated, a dusty cul-de-sac at the bottom of the map. To truly join the modern world, Los Angeles needed a mainline railroad. And standing squarely in the way was the Cajon Pass. If you think driving a truck up a 6% grade is tough, try doing it with a steam locomotive. Steel wheels on steel rails have very little friction. It's a delicate balance. If the grade is too steep, the wheels just spin, sparking and screeching, going nowhere. The generally accepted maximum grade for a mainline railroad is about 2.2%. The natural slope of the Cajon Pass was well over 3% in many places. The math didn't work. But the money demanded it work. In the early 1880s, the California Southern Railroad, a subsidiary of the mighty Santa Fe Railway, took on the challenge. They needed to connect the port of San Diego and the growing hub of San Bernardino to the transcontinental network in Barstow. The engineers looked at the maps, looked at the mountains, and probably poured themselves a stiff drink. The man tasked with solving this puzzle was Fred Perris. He was a surveyor and engineer with a calm demeanour and a brilliant mind for topography. He spent weeks in the saddle, riding the ridges and the washes, looking for a line that would allow a train to climb nearly 3,000 feet in roughly 25 miles without stalling. Perris found the key, but it wasn't easy. It required a series of sweeping curves, massive cuts into the hillsides, and towering trestles to bridge the deep ravines. The construction began in 1882, and it was a war against the rock. There were no hydraulic excavators or diesel scrapers. This was the era of black powder, hand drills, and human muscle. Armies of labourers, many of them Chinese immigrants who had already proven their mettle on the Central Pacific, swarmed the pass. They hung from ropes to drill blast holes into the sheer cliffs. They moved mountains of earth one wheelbarrow at a time. The big cut near the summit was the centrepiece of the struggle. It was a deep notch carved straight through a granite ridge to lower the summit elevation. The sound of explosions echoed through the canyon daily, startling the coyotes and sending clouds of dust drifting toward the desert. It was dangerous, grueling work. Landslides were common. In the winter, flash floods roared down the canyons, washing away weeks of progress in a single night. But by 1885 the rails were laid. The first train to conquer the pass was a spectacle. It huffed and puffed its way up the grade, the steam engine straining, the fireman shoveling coal like a madman. When it crested the summit and began the descent into the Mojave, it signalled the end of the mule team era. However, the victory was short-lived. The geology of the pass, that unstable, crumbled rock we talked about earlier, wasn't done fighting. The original line followed the creek bed too closely in some places. In the winter of 1884, massive storms hit. The creeks turned into raging rivers, tearing out miles of track and twisting the iron rails like pretzels. The railroad had to rebuild, moving the line higher up the slopes, away from the destructive water. This is a theme in the Cajon Pass: build, destroy, rebuild higher. The infrastructure is always reacting to the landscape. Technically, the Santa Fe line through Cajon is a marvel of compensated grade. This means that on the curves the gradient is slightly reduced to compensate for the friction of the wheels binding against the rails. It allows the locomotive to maintain a steady effort. Even so, the climb was a beast. In the steam era, heavy trains required helper engines. You'd have a massive locomotive on the front and 2 or 3 more pushing from the rear, all working in synchronized fury to lift the tonnage. The sound of a helper set climbing the pass at night was legendary. The rhythmic chug-chug-chug would reverberate off the canyon walls, a heavy metal symphony of industry. Sparks would fly from the stacks, sometimes igniting the brush, leading to the railroad fires that are still a hazard today. Then came the competition. The Union Pacific, originally the Los Angeles and Salt Lake Railroad, wanted in on the action. In the early 1900s, they negotiated trackage rights to use the Santa Fe line. Later, the Southern Pacific built their own line, the Palmdale Cutoff, which takes a longer, slightly gentler route higher up the canyon wall. Today, looking out the window of your cab, you can see this history in layers. Down in the wash, you might spot the ruined pylons of an old trestle. Halfway up the slope is the current BNSSF, formerly Santa Fe line. Higher still is the Union Pacific line. It's like looking at the rings of a tree, but made of steel and ballast. One of the most fascinating locations for rail fans and truckers who like trains is the Sullivan's Curve. It's a massive horseshoe-shaped bend where the tracks loop back on themselves to gain elevation. If you're lucky, you can see a modern freight train that is so long the locomotives on the front are passing the locomotives on the rear, separated only by a narrow ravine. It's a visual representation of just how much steel is moving through here. There's a human story here too about the hobos of the Great Depression. The slow-moving trains on the steep grade made Cajon Pass a prime spot for hopping freights. Men looking for work would wait in the bushes near the summit where the trains were crawling at walking speed and swing aboard an empty boxcar. It was dangerous. A slip meant falling under the wheels, but for many, it was the only way to get to California. The railroad bulls, security guards, knew this and patrolled the pass heavily, leading to a cat-and-mouse game in the dusty scrub. The transition from steam to diesel in the 1940s and 50s changed the sound of the pass, but not the struggle. Diesel-electric locomotives are more efficient, but they still overheat. The dynamic braking whine of a modern train descending the grade is a distinct sound, a high-pitched howl as the electric motors turn into generators to slow the train down. It's the same concept as your Jake brake, just on a massive electrical scale. Even today, the railroad is the quiet giant of the pass. While we sit in traffic on I-15 cursing the four-wheelers, a mile-long train is silently slipping through the darkness a few hundred yards away, carrying enough cargo to fill hundreds of our trailers. We are colleagues, in a way, the rubber tire haulers and the steel wheel haulers, both fighting the same gravity, both moving the world's stuff. Sometimes, late at night, when the highway noise lulls, you can hear the train horn echoing from the deep canyon. It's a lonely, mournful sound. It's a salute to the engineers like Fred Perris, who looked at a vertical wall of rock and said, "I can put a train there." The rails brought the heavy freight, the coal and the timber, but the American public wanted something else. They wanted freedom. They wanted to go where they pleased, when they pleased. They didn't want to be tethered to a schedule or a track. They wanted the open road. And just as the smoke of the steam engines was beginning to fade, a new kind of path was being carved into the dirt, a path that would become a cultural icon. The Mother Road was coming to the Cajon Pass. The steel rails had conquered the grade for the captains of industry, but for the average American family in the early 20th century, the Cajon Pass was still a formidable adversary. The automobile was changing from a rich man's toy into a tool of mass migration, and with it came the demand for a road that was more than just a widened mule track. The age of the wagon was dead. The age of the Mother Road was dawning. Route 66. The name alone conjures images of neon signs, chrome bumpers, and the open horizon. But before it was a song or a TV show, it was a ribbon of pavement, and often gravel, that stitched the country together. And right here, north of San Bernardino, was one of its most challenging chapters. Officially commissioned on November 11, 1926, US Highway 66 didn't just appear out of thin air. In the Cajon Pass, it initially followed the path of the National Trails Road, which was really just a fancy name for the improved wagon roads we talked about earlier. But as traffic increased, the state of California began to pour concrete and asphalt, solidifying the route that would bring millions to the West Coast. Driving the Cajon Pass in the 1920s and 30s was a visceral mechanical combat. Today we complain if our adaptive cruise control brakes a little too abruptly. Back then, getting a Ford Model T or a Chevy Stovebolt 6 over the summit was a feat of engineering and patience. Here is a technical detail that boggles the modern mind. The fuel delivery system of the Model T Ford. It relied on gravity. The gas tank was located under the front seat, and the carburetor was up near the engine. On a steep incline, like the grueling grades of the early Cajon alignment, the angle of the car would lift the carburetor higher than the gas tank. The fuel would simply stop flowing, and the engine would sputter and die. The solution? Reverse. You would see drivers turning their cars around and backing up the steepest sections of the pass. Reverse gear in a Model T had more torque anyway, so it was a double win. better climbing power, and the gas kept flowing to the engine. Imagine that scene today, a family sedan reversing up the shoulder of I-15 because the physics of the fuel pump gave up. It was a common sight in the canyon then, a slow, backward parade of Tin Lizzies groaning toward the summit. The road itself was narrow, often lacking shoulders. In the lower sections it wound through the wash, susceptible to the same floods that plagued the railroad. As it climbed, it hugged the contours of the hills, resulting in tight blind curves that became known as Dead Man's Curve, or similar ominous nicknames. The pavement was thin, often melting in the summer heat or cracking in the winter freeze. But despite the danger, there was a romance to it. This was the gateway to California. For the Dust Bowl migrants of the 1930s, the Okies and Arkies fleeing the devastated plains, the Cajon Pass was the final hurdle. They came in, overloaded trucks and sedans, mattresses tied to the roof, radiators hissing steam. There is a profound human element in that image. Imagine reaching the top of this pass after driving 2,000 miles across the desert at 30 miles per hour. You pull over at the summit, the engine ticking as it cools. You step out onto the gravel. Behind you is the harsh, unforgiving Mojave. Ahead of you, down through the haze, are the orange groves of San Bernardino. It must have looked like Eden. It was the moment the journey ended and the new life began. Steinbeck wrote about it, but thousands of real people lived it right on this pavement. Water was the most critical commodity on the road. Cars in those days didn't have pressurized cooling systems with overflow reservoirs. If the water boiled, it escaped as steam, and you had to replace it. Enterprising locals set up water stations along the grade. You'd see desert water bags, canvas sacks filled with water, hanging from the front bumpers of cars. The evaporation through the canvas kept the water inside cool, ready to be poured into a thirsty radiator. The alignment of Route 66 in the pass changed over time. In the early 1930s, a major project straightened out some of the worst curves and widened the road to a superhighway of 3 lanes, the middle lane being a terrifying suicide lane for passing in either direction. This alignment, known as Cajon Boulevard, still exists in fragments today. If you look to the west of the modern I-15 as you drive north, you can see the old road paralleling the freeway. It's quieter now, the asphalt grey and crumbling, reclaimed by the sagebrush. One of the most iconic structures from this era is the Crowder Canyon Bridge. Built in the 1930s, it's a concrete arch bridge that carried the highway over a wash. It still stands, a ghost of the past bypassed by the modern Interstate. It's a favourite spot for urban explorers and history buffs who want to walk on the same concrete that carried the Joad family and the Grapes of Wrath. The traffic on Route 66 wasn't just desperate migrants, it was also the birth of tourism. As cars became more reliable, people started driving for fun. Roadside architecture began to spring up to catch their eye and their dimes. In the canyon, this meant auto camps, tiny cabins where you could sleep for the night, and service stations built in whimsical styles. The Camp Cajon was a famous stop, a stone-built rest area constructed in the late 1910s that became a welcome oasis for the Route 66 travellers. It had picnic tables, stoves, and shade. It was a community hub where travellers swapped stories about the road ahead. Watch out for the speed trap in Victorville, one might say. Make sure you have spare tyres for the desert heat, another would advise. It was the analogue version of a Waze comment section. Sadly, a massive flood in 1938 wiped out much of Camp Cajon, a reminder that nature is the ultimate landlord here. Driving the old road required a connection to the machine that we have lost. You had to listen to the engine. You had to double-clutch the non-synchronized transmission to shift gears without grinding. You had to feel the fade in the mechanical drum brakes as you descended and know when to pull over to let them cool. It was an active participation in the act of travel, not just a passive commute. The Mother Road was also a path of neon-lit commerce. Billboards started to dot the hillsides, advertising everything from real milkshakes to last-chance gas. The commercialization of the landscape had begun. The pass was no longer just a geological feature, it was a linear marketplace. Today, if you exit the interstate at Kenwood Avenue or Cleghorn Road, you can drive short sections of the old Route 66. The suspension of a modern truck makes the bumps feel negligible, but try to imagine doing it on leaf springs and bias ply tyres. The road feels intimate. You're down in the landscape, not flying above it. You can smell the sage and the dust. There's a certain melancholy to these abandoned sections. They are like shed skin. the husk of a previous era left behind by the growing organism of the transportation network. You can spot the old culverts, the hand-laid stone walls, the faded white lines. They whisper of a time when the journey was slower, harder, and perhaps a bit more meaningful. As the sun sets on our drive tonight, imagine the headlights of a 1939 Packard sweeping across the canyon walls. Inside, the radio is playing big band music, static crackling with the interference from the ignition. The driver is tired, his hands gripping the large, thin steering wheel. He's looking for a place to stop, a beacon in the dark, and up ahead, at the very top of the hill, a neon sign flickers to life. It promises coffee, a hot meal, and a view of the world below. It's a landmark that survived the transition from wagon trail to Route 66 to the Interstate era. It's the Summit Inn. And as the old Packard pulls into the gravel lot, we are ready to park alongside it and hear the stories of the most famous rest stop in the pass. The climb is done. At least the hardest part of the upward struggle is behind us. The engine temperature gauge settles back down to a comfortable middle ground, and the turbocharger spins down from its high-pitched whine to a gentle whistle. We have reached the crest, and right here, perched at the very top of the world, or so it felt, stood a beacon that for decades signalled the transition between the coastal reality and the desert dream. We are pulling into the gravel lot of the Summit Inn. If you've driven the Cajon Pass any time before the summer of 2016, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, let me paint the picture for you, because in the folklore of American highways, this place is as holy as a cathedral, just with better milkshakes. The Summit Inn wasn't just a restaurant, it was a checkpoint. Situated right off the exit at the top of the pass, where Mariposa Road intersects with the highway, it sat there like a red-roofed sentinel. It had that classic low-slung mid-century look, a little bit ranch style, a little bit roadside diner, and entirely welcoming. The neon sign out front buzzed with a reassuring hum, a red glow that cut through the thickest mountain fog and the darkest moonless nights. When you pushed open the heavy glass door, a bell would jingle. Not a digital chime, but a real mechanical bell that had announced the arrival of dusty travellers since the Truman administration. The air inside always smelled the same, a comforting blend of grilling onions, brewing coffee, and the faint sweet scent of old vinyl. It was the smell of 1,000 breakfasts served at 3 a.m. The location was strategic genius. Whether you were a trucker hauling produce south to the docks, or a family in a station wagon heading north to the casinos of Las Vegas, the Summit Inn was the natural pause. It was the deep breath at the top of the stairs. Geographically, it sat at roughly 4,200 feet, which meant in the winter, there was often a pile of dirty snow pushed up against the curb, and in the summer, the air was 10 degrees cooler than the furnace of San Bernardino below. Let's talk about the booth. The red vinyl booth with the sparkly finish that stuck to your legs in the summer. That booth was the great equalizer. In the Summit Inn, the social hierarchy of the outside world dissolved. You could walk in there on a Tuesday afternoon and see a fascinating cross-section of America. In the corner, you'd have a couple of old-timer truckers, the kind with skin like cured leather and stories about shifting twin-stick transmissions without a clutch. They'd be nursing black coffee, complaining about the dot and the price of diesel. 2 booths down, you'd find a family of tourists from Ohio, looking sunburned and bewildered, trying to figure out how far it was to the Hoover Dam, and right next to them might be a Hollywood executive or a minor celebrity, hiding behind sunglasses trying to look inconspicuous while eating a club sandwich. The most famous legend of the Summit Inn involves the king himself. The story goes that Elvis Presley stopped here once in the mid-1950s. He was driving up to Vegas, probably in a Cadillac that cost more than the building he was entering. He sat down, ordered a meal, and walked over to the jukebox to play some tunes. But when he scanned the selection, he didn't find any of his own records. Not Hound Dog, not Heartbreak Hotel. Nothing. As the story is told by the old waitresses who kept the coffee pots full, Elvis didn't take this well. He supposedly kicked the jukebox, gave it a solid boot with a blue suede shoe, and stormed out. It's one of those tales that might be 50% truth and 50% mountain air, but the staff swore by it. For years, people would look at that jukebox with a little extra reverence, wondering if it was the same machine that had disappointed the king of rock and roll. But the Summit Inn wasn't just about celebrities, it was about the menu, specifically the ostrich burgers. Now, serving ostrich meat might sound like a hipster trend from 2024, but the Summit Inn was doing it decades ago. It was a nod to the local high desert agriculture, where eccentric ranchers raised the big birds. Seeing ostrich burger on a laminated menu next to the grilled cheese was a reminder that you had left the predictable suburbs and entered the Mojave. It was a rite of passage. "Did you try the ostrich?" was the standard question when you told someone you stopped there. It tasted like lean beef, by the way, but eating it made you feel like an adventurer. From a technical standpoint, the inn was a survivor of infrastructure changes. It was originally built in 1928, down closer to the old Route 66 alignment. But when the highway was widened and shifted, the building was physically moved to its final hilltop location in 1952. Think about the logistics of that. Moving a building up a mountain pass in the 1950s wasn't exactly a simple flatbed job. It showed the stubbornness of the owners. They knew the location was gold, and they weren't going to let a little thing like highway realignment put them out of business. The windows of the dining room offered a panoramic view of the pass. You could sit there, chewing on a fry, and watch the headlights of the trucks crawling up the grade you just conquered. It provided a sense of separation. You were inside, warm and fed. The struggle was outside, dark and cold. It's a feeling that every long-haul driver cherishes, that brief moment of being a spectator rather than a participant in the grind. There was a vintage memorabilia shop attached to the diner, filled with the kind of dust-collecting treasures that are irresistible after 6 hours of driving. Route 66 patches, model trucks, scorpion lollipops, and postcards that showed the pass in its golden era. It was a museum of the road, curated by neglect and nostalgia. The staff at the Summit Inn were a breed apart. To work there, you had to be able to handle the rush of a tour bus unloading 50 hungry seniors one minute and the solitary brooding of a tired driver the next. They had a rhythm, a honey and sweetie vernacular that felt genuine. They poured coffee with an instinctual timing, showing up at your elbow just as the cup hit the half-empty mark. That's a service standard you don't get at a drive-through window, but legends like roads can be fragile. On August 16, 2016, the Blue Cut Fire erupted in the canyon. We'll talk more about the winds later, but that day, the Santa Ana winds were blowing with a demonic fury. The fire moved with terrifying speed, consuming over 30,000 acres. It raced up the canyons, feeding on the dry brush, a wall of flame moving faster than a truck could drive. The Summit Inn stood in its path. There is a tragic irony in a place surviving earthquakes, economic recessions, and highway bypasses for nearly 90 years, only to be taken by the brush. The fire swept over the ridge and consumed the historic structure. In a matter of hours, the red booths, the signed photos on the walls, the ostrich burger menu, and the ghost of Elvis's temper were reduced to ash and twisted metal. Driving by that spot today is a somber experience for those who remember. The lot is empty. The sign, which miraculously survived the initial flames only to fall later, is gone. It's a phantom limb of the highway. You look over, expecting to see the red roof and the glow of the neon, and there is only a vacant patch of dirt and the unstoppable encroachment of desert weeds. The loss of the Summit Inn marked the end of an era for the Cajon Pass. It was the last great holdout of the Route 66 spirit on this stretch of road. Now, travellers stop at the sterile gas stations and fast food chains clustered around the Oak Hills exit a bit further down. They get their calories, but they don't get the soul. They don't get the story. Yet, in our journey tonight, the inn is still open. In the theatre of the mind, the neon is still buzzing. We can still pull the air brake, hear the hiss of the release, and walk through that glass door. We can order a slice of apple pie, served warm, obviously, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting down the side, and listen to the bell jingle as the door opens again. Maybe it's a young driver, his eyes wide with the fatigue of his first solo run through the mountains. He looks around, unsure of the protocol, and maybe, just maybe, an old hand in the corner booth nods to him, a silent gesture that says, "You made it to the top, kid. Sit down. The coffee's hot." The Summit Inn reminds us that the road isn't just about asphalt and geography. It's about the pauses in between. It's about the places where the motion stops long enough for humanity to catch up. The pass is a choke point for traffic, but places like the inn were choke points for connection. So, let's finish that imaginary coffee, leave a generous tip on the Formica table, and head back out to the truck. The air outside is crisp, the stars are bright above the high desert. We have crested the hill, but the journey isn't over. The road widens now, expanding into something massive, something modern, and something incredibly fast. The quaint curves of Route 66 are behind us. The concrete ribbons of the superhighway age lie ahead. The gravel of the summit-in parking lot crunches beneath the tyres one last time as the truck swings wide, turning back toward the on-ramp. The nostalgic glow of the neon sign fades in the side mirrors, replaced by the stark, clinical white of LED highway lights. We are leaving the era of the diner and the two-lane blacktop. We are merging onto the spine of modern commerce. We are entering the domain of the interstate giant. If Route 66 was a handshake, Interstate 15 is a bear hug from a grizzly. It is massive, overwhelming, and undeniably powerful. As the rig accelerates, the turbocharger spooling up to match the flow of traffic, you can feel the difference in the engineering beneath the wheels. The road doesn't just follow the land anymore, it dominates it. The transformation of the Cajon Pass from a winding mountain road to an 8-lane superhighway wasn't just a paving project, it was an act of terraforming. By the late 1960s, the charm of the old road had worn thin against the grinding reality of population growth. Los Angeles was exploding, Las Vegas was booming, and the amount of freight moving between them was choking the old arteries. The quaint curves that thrilled the tourist in 1930 were killing the truckers of 1960. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, signed by President Eisenhower, had set the wheels in motion for the interstate system. But the Cajon Pass presented a unique problem. You couldn't just lay down 4 lanes of concrete on the existing footprint. The canyon was too narrow, the slopes too unstable, and the fault lines too active. The engineers had to think in 3 dimensions. The result is what we drive today, a bifurcated highway. Notice how, in many parts of the pass, you can't even see the opposing traffic. The northbound and southbound lanes are often separated by hundreds of yards of scrub brush and rock, sometimes at completely different elevations. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a necessity. By splitting the highway, the engineers could tailor the grade for each direction. For the northbound traffic, us, right now, the climb is a steady, relentless slog, but it's manageable. For the southbound traffic, the descent is steeper and faster. By separating them, the designers reduced the risk of head-on collisions, which were a gruesome regularity on the old undivided roads. It also allowed them to navigate the geological puzzle pieces of the San Andreas Fault without trying to force a massive single roadbed onto a shifting hillside. The construction of this modern alignment, particularly the major expansion in the late 1960s and early 1970s, was a war of attrition against the Earth. It involved moving roughly 20 million cubic yards of dirt and rock. To put that in perspective, that's enough earth to fill the Rose Bowl Stadium about 40 times over. The machines used for this were dinosaurs of diesel, massive scrapers and bulldozers that roared through the canyon day and night. There is a story told by an old heavy equipment operator named Red, who worked on the widening project in 1969. He described the dust as being so thick you couldn't see the blade of your own dozer. They worked in shifts that ignored the sun, under the glare of temporary floodlights that cast long, eerie shadows against the canyon walls. Red recalled that the vibration was constant. The ground shook not from earthquakes, but from the sheer weight of the machinery ripping the mountain apart. They were cutting through that notorious Polona schist again, the blue-cut rock that is slick and unstable. Every time they cut a slope, they had to worry about it sliding back down. They used massive terracing, those step-like cuts you see on the high canyon walls, to try and stabilize the slide zones. It's a technique called benching, designed to catch falling debris before it hits the roadway. One of the most impressive technical details of I-15 is the pavement itself. This isn't your driveway concrete. It is high-strength, reinforced Portland cement concrete, laid down in slabs thick enough to support the weight of a main battle tank, which is fitting, since military convoys from the desert bases are a common sight here. If you listen closely to the tyres, you'll hear a high-pitched singing noise. That comes from the longitudinal grooving. Unlike older highways where the texture was brushed across the lane, modern mountain highways often have grooves cut parallel to the direction of travel. This helps with tracking, keeping the tyres moving in a straight line, and it's incredible for water drainage. When the sudden desert monsoons hit, those grooves channel the water away, preventing hydroplaning. It's a subtle safety feature that saves lives every time it rains, yet we rarely think about it as we roll over it at 60 miles per hour. As we cruise north, the scale of the infrastructure becomes apparent. The road widens to 4, sometimes 5 lanes. It feels like an airport runway draped over a mountain range. The curves are sweeping and banked, designed for speed. You can take a corner at 65 miles per hour that, on the old Route 66, would have required slowing to 25. This speed creates a strange psychological effect. In the wagon days, you had time to learn every rock and bush. In the Route 66 days, you had time to read the billboards. On the interstate, the landscape blurs into a stream of brown and green. You don't interact with the pass, you process it. It becomes a video game level, a series of inputs and outputs. Watch the lane drift, check the mirrors, monitor the speed. But the interstate brought something else. Volume. The river of cargo we will talk about later relies on this capacity. I-15 through the Cajon Pass is one of the busiest freight corridors in North America. We are surrounded not just by other trucks, but by a fleet. To the left, a set of doubles from a parcel carrier. To the right, a flatbed hauling lumber. Behind us, the distinct grill of a car hauler. We are a school of fish moving in a concrete current. There is a specific section known as the Cajon Summit on the modern map, distinct from the old Summit Inn location. Here, the elevation peaks at 4,090 feet. The highway engineers flattened the top of the pass significantly. Originally, the crest was sharper, a distinct peak. The Interstate project shaved the top of the mountain off, creating a broad, flat plateau that allows trucks to build up speed before the descent or the continuation into the high desert. It was like giving the mountain a haircut with 1 billion tons of TNT. The lighting system deserves a mention too. As we drive through the darkened sections, you might notice the lack of overhead lights in some areas, followed by intense illumination in others. This is intentional, partly to reduce light pollution for the observatories in the mountains, and partly to manage driver fatigue. Constant bright light can be hypnotic. The breaks in lighting keep the eyes adjusting, keeping the brain slightly more alert. However, the interstate giant isn't perfect. It has a temper. The very width that makes it efficient also makes it a wind tunnel. We will get to the Santa Ana winds soon, but the engineering of I-15 actually exacerbated the wind problem in some spots. By carving wide, smooth channels through the ridges, the construction inadvertently created perfect racetracks for the air currents. It's a reminder that every time we try to outsmart nature, nature finds a new way to push back. The human cost of building this road was real. It wasn't just the sweat of the workers, it was the displacement of the small communities that used to cling to the canyon floor. When the right-of-way was expanded, old cabins, small gas stations, and quirky roadside attractions were bought out and bulldozed. The efficiency of the interstate has no room for the eccentricities of the past. It values throughput over character. Yet, there is a majesty to it. Driving here at night, looking ahead at the ribbon of red taillights stretching up the grade for miles, it looks like blood pumping through an artery. It is the lifeblood of the economy, visible and glowing. The interstate also introduced the concept of the runaway truck ramp, vast pits of gravel designed to catch vehicles that have lost the battle with gravity. We will examine the mechanics of brake failure later, but the sheer existence of these ramps, massive scars on the landscape filled with deep, loose aggregate, is a testament to the respect the engineers had for the grade. They built a superhighway, yes, but they knew they couldn't repeal the laws of physics. They built safety nets into the concrete. As we level out near the summit, the engine load decreases. The turbo whine drops in pitch. We are floating on a layer of engineering that cost billions of dollars and decades of labour. It's easy to take it for granted, to curse the construction zones and the lane closures. But next time you see a crew working on the shoulder at 2 a.m, under those blinding portable lights, remember the scale of what they are maintaining. They are keeping the giant alive. The Cajon Pass is no longer a barrier, it is a conduit. The interstate made the mountains irrelevant to the average driver. You can cross the San Andreas Fault while drinking a soda and listening to a podcast, completely oblivious to the tectonic drama beneath your seat. But for us, the drivers of the heavy iron, the connection remains. We feel the grade, we know the road, and as we prepare to tip the nose of the truck downward, we know that the interstate might be wide, and it might be modern, but gravity is still the boss, and gravity is waiting for us on the other side of the hill. We have reached the tipping point. The engine, which has been shouting its mechanical lungs out for the last 15 miles of climbing, suddenly goes quiet. The boost gauge drops to 0. The nose of the truck dips imperceptibly, like a ship cresting a large swell, and the view through the windshield changes. The horizon drops. We aren't looking at the sky anymore. We are looking down. Welcome to the other side of the coin. If the climb is a test of horsepower and cooling systems, the descent is a test of nerve, physics, and friction. We're about to engage in a high-stakes waltz with gravity on one of the most notorious grades in the American highway system. In the trucking world, there is an old adage that is practically tattooed on the inside of every rookie's eyelids. You can go down a mountain too slow 1,000 times, but you can only go down it too fast once. It's a cliché because it's true. The Cajon Pass descent, particularly the southbound lane dropping back into the San Bernardino Valley, is an unforgiving teacher. Let's talk about the physics involved here. We are sitting in a vehicle that, fully loaded, weighs 80,000 pounds. That's 40 tons of steel, cargo, and potential energy. Sitting at the summit at over 4,000 feet, we have built up a massive amount of potential energy, like a roller coaster car clicking to the top of the lift hill. As soon as we start rolling down, that energy converts to kinetic energy, speed. And gravity doesn't care about your schedule or your safety rating. It just wants to pull you to the center of the Earth as fast as possible. The grade here averages about 3% generally, but there are sections, specifically the southbound descent, that sustain a 6% grade for miles. That means for every 100 feet we travel forward, we drop 6 feet vertically. It doesn't sound like much on paper, but in a loaded semi it feels like falling. Without any braking, a truck on a 6% grade would accelerate to over 100 miles per hour in a terrifyingly short amount of time before inevitably leaving the roadway. So how do we stop the fall without burning up the brakes? We use the engine. This is where the magic of the Jake brake comes in. You've heard it, that distinct staccato machine gun burp that echoes off the canyon walls. Brrr, ap. To the uninitiated, it's just noise. To a trucker, it's the sound of safety. The technical name is the compression release engine brake, and it was invented by Clessie Cummins, the father of the modern diesel engine. The story goes that Clessie nearly killed himself on the Cajon Pass in the 1930s. He was driving a prototype diesel truck and the brakes faded on the descent. He managed to ride it out, but the terror of that runaway ride inspired him to invent a system that turns the engine into a massive air compressor to slow the vehicle down. Here is what is happening under the hood right now. When I flip this switch on the dash, I'm altering the valve timing of the engine. Normally, a diesel engine compresses air in the cylinder, injects fuel, and the explosion pushes the piston down, creating power. But with the Jake brake on, the engine compresses the air and then, right at the top of the stroke, pop! The exhaust valve opens and releases that compressed air out the stack, instead of the compressed air springing the piston back down, which would push the truck forward. The energy is wasted out the exhaust. The engine is now working against the rotation of the wheels. It's absorbing power. It's negative horsepower. A strong engine brake can generate over 600 braking horsepower. That's enough to hold this 80,000-pound beast at a steady 35 miles per hour without me ever touching the brake pedal. But you have to set it up right. This brings us to the art of the transmission. Most modern fleets have automated manuals, which are essentially robots that shift gears for you. They are safe, boring, and efficient. But let's pretend we're driving a classic rig with an 18-speed Eaton Fuller manual transmission. This is a gearbox that requires a split shifting technique. You don't just move the stick, you manipulate a splitter button on the side of the knob and a range selector on the front. The rule of thumb is to descend the hill in one gear lower than the gear you climbed it in. But on the Cajon, you might want to drop 2. The goal is to get the engine RPMs high, up around 1,800 or 1,900. That's where the Jake brake is strongest. So, at the summit, before the speed builds up, you make your move. You clutch in, rev the engine to match the lower gear speed, a blip of the throttle, and slide the stick into the lower gate. Clunk. The gear bites. You let the clutch out. The engine roars to life, not with power, but with resistance. You toggle the Jake brake switch to high, activating all 6 cylinders. The truck shudders slightly as the retarding force kicks in. You're now hanging on the engine compression. If you mess this up, if you try to downshift once you're already rolling too fast, you risk missing a gear. You clutch in, but the road speed is too high for the gear you want, and the engine speed can't catch up. You can't get it into gear. Now you are in neutral. You are freewheeling. You're a 40-ton sled with no engine braking. That is the moment the pucker factor, a highly scientific trucking term for sheer terror, goes off the charts. Your only option then is the service brakes, the air brakes at the wheels, and this is the Achilles heel of heavy trucking. Air brakes work by pressing a brake shoe against a metal drum or pads against a rotor. This creates friction, which creates heat, a lot of heat. On a long grade like Cajon, if you ride the brake pedal, the drums can get so hot they expand. As they expand, they move away from the shoes. You have to push the pedal further to make contact. Eventually the shoes glaze over, the friction material turns into a slick glassy substance. When this happens, you have brake fade. You can stand on the pedal with both feet and the truck won't slow down. You might see smoke billowing from the trailer wheels, a distinct acrid chemical blue smoke that smells like burning resin, and fear. That's why we use snub braking. You let the Jake brake do the work. If the speed creeps up to, say, 40 mph, you press the brake pedal firmly to drop the speed to 35, then let off completely. This gives the drums time to cool in the rushing air before you need them again. It's a rhythmic, disciplined way of driving. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. The descent at night is a visual spectacle. As we drop down the southern face, the entire San Bernardino Valley opens up below us. It looks like a carpet of diamonds spilled on black velvet. The grid of the city lights stretches out to the horizon, shimmering in the heat rising from the pavement. It's beautiful, but it's a distraction. You can't stare at the pretty lights. You have to watch the tachometer and the air pressure gauge. There is a camaraderie on the descent. You'll see the brake lights of the truck in front of you flick on and off in that snubbing rhythm. You know he's doing the same math you are. Sometimes you'll smell the brakes of a guy who's pushing it too hard, a warning scent that drifts into your cab through the vents. You might key up the CB radio. Southbound flatbed, you got some smoke rolling off your trailer drives. A calm voice might crackle back. Yeah, copy that. Backing out of her now. Thanks, driver. We are managing energy. That's all trucking is, really. We turned diesel fuel into potential energy climbing the hill, and now we're turning potential energy into heat and noise to get down. The lane choice is crucial here too. The right two lanes are the designated truck lanes. We are legally required to stay there, usually with a speed limit of 35 or 45 km/h, while the cars zoom past us in the left lanes at 75. It feels like standing still, but 45 mph in a loaded truck on a 6% downgrade feels plenty fast. Sometimes you'll get a super trucker who thinks gravity doesn't apply to him. He'll come flying past in the third lane, Jake brake screaming, trailer leaning in the curves. You just shake your head and give him room. You know that if anything happens in front of him, he has zero options. He's a missile. As we continue the descent, the air pressure changes. Your ears might pop. The temperature rises. We are sinking back into the heavy atmosphere of the basin. The engine brake continues its loud, rhythmic conversation with the mountain. Brr-ap. Brr-ap. It's a comforting sound, a reminder that the machine is doing its job. We are suspended in a delicate balance between the mass of the cargo and the friction of the mechanicals. It's a dance that happens thousands of times a day on this pass, usually without incident. But the potential for chaos is always there, lurking in a glazed brake shoe or a missed gear shift. It makes you respect the pioneers we talked about earlier. They did this with wooden blocks and dragging logs. We have space-age materials and pneumatic systems, and it still commands our full attention. The grade begins to shallow out. The relentless push at the back of the seat eases. We can shift up a gear, let the RPMs drop, and switch off the Jake brake. The silence that rushes back into the cab is sudden. We have survived the drop. The gravity that wanted to crush us has been tamed, converted safely into heat, and dissipated into the night air. But gravity isn't the only invisible force in this canyon. As we level out, the truck buffsets slightly, a sudden shove from the side that requires a quick correction on the steering wheel. The trees by the side of the road are bent permanently in one direction. We have handled the vertical challenge. Now we have to deal with the horizontal one. The Santa Ana winds are waking up. We have negotiated the vertical drop. The brakes are cooling, the drums contracting back to their normal size with little metallic tink-tink sounds that you can only hear if you're parked. But as the truck levels out, just when you think you can relax your grip on the wheel, the cab shudders. It's not a vibration from the road, it's a shove, a solid, heavy push from the passenger side, as if a giant hand just slapped the fender. Welcome to the domain of the Santa Ana winds. In most places, wind is just weather. It messes up your hair or blows the leaves around. Here, in the throat of the Cajon Pass, wind is a geological entity. It is a physical presence that occupies the canyon alongside the rocks and the asphalt. And for a high-profile vehicle like the one we are piloting, it is the invisible predator. The locals call them the devil winds. Raymond Chandler, the famous noir writer who knew the mood of Los Angeles better than anyone, wrote that during these winds, meek little wives feel the edge of the carving knife and study the necks of their husbands. There is an electricity in the air, a dry static charge that makes your skin itch and your nerves fray. The science behind it is a lesson in atmospheric hydraulics. It usually happens in the autumn and winter. A massive dome of high pressure builds up over the Great Basin, that vast high desert region covering Nevada and Utah. Meanwhile, a low-pressure system sits off the coast of California. Nature hates an imbalance. The air wants to move from the high pressure to the low pressure to even things out. If there were no mountains, this would just be a gentle breeze. But there are mountains, a massive wall of them. The air, heavy and cold, is blocked by the San Gabriels and the San Bernardinos. It flows along the ridges looking for a way out, like water behind a dam. And where does it find the crack in the dam? Right here, the Cajon Pass. Remember that Venturi effect we mentioned earlier? This is where it gets violent. The entire air mass of the Great Basin tries to squeeze through this narrow gap at once. As the air is compressed into the canyon, it accelerates, and as it drops in elevation from the high desert to the coast, it compresses further and heats up. About 5.5 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet of descent. By the time it hits the truck, it is hot, dry, and moving at hurricane speeds. Driving a semi-truck in a strong Santa Ana event is like trying to carry a sheet of plywood across a parking lot in a gale, except the plywood weighs 35,000 pounds, and you are moving at highway speeds. A standard 53-foot trailer is essentially a giant sail. It presents over 400 square feet of surface area to the side wind. When a gust hits, it hits the trailer first. You feel the back of the truck step out, pivoting around the drive tyres, then the cab gets hit. You have to steer into the wind to keep the truck going straight. If the wind is blowing from the east, your left, you are steering left, sometimes turning the wheel a quarter turn just to stay in your lane. You're technically driving diagonally to go forward. This is called crabbing. The danger zone isn't just the steady blow, it's the gusts. You can be leaning into the wind, holding that steady countersteer when suddenly the wind stops for a second. If you don't react instantly and straighten the wheel, you'll steer yourself right into the next lane, or worse, into the concrete barrier. Then, wham, the gust returns, trying to push you off the road. It's an exhausting full-body workout. The scariest scenario is the blowover. This is exactly what it sounds like. The wind catches the trailer, lifts the windward wheels off the ground and flips the entire rig onto its side. It happens in slow motion. Drivers who have survived it say there is a moment of weightlessness, a surreal pause before the world tilts 90 degrees. An empty trailer is the most vulnerable. A fully loaded trailer has weight to hold it down, but an empty one, or one carrying light cargo like potato chips or insulation, is just a kite on wheels. During high wind warnings, you will often see convoys of smart truckers parked on the shoulder or in the designated holding areas, waiting it out. The dispatchers might be screaming about deadlines, but the veterans know that a late load is better than a load scattered across 3 lanes of Interstate 15. There is a specific historical event that serves as the cautionary tale for every driver in this region. The Monowinds event of November 30th and December 1st, 2011. While technically a slightly different meteorological setup than a classic Santa Ana, the result in the pass was apocalyptic. Winds gusted to nearly 100 miles per hour. It wasn't just air, it was a sandblaster. The dust was so thick visibility dropped to 0. The wind snapped wooden power poles like toothpicks. It tore the massive overhead freeway signs off their steel trusses and threw them down the road like playing cards. But the carnage to the trucking industry was staggering. In that single night, dozens of semi-trucks were blown over in the region. There is dashcam footage from that night that looks like a disaster movie. You see a truck driving along and then simply lifting up and flopping over. The California Highway Patrol had to shut down the pass entirely, a rare and desperate measure. They had to bring in snowplows not to move snow, but to push the rocks and debris off the asphalt. When you drive through the pass now, look at the trees, the eucalyptus and the oaks near the washes. They are permanently disfigured. Their branches grow almost exclusively on the downwind side. They are biological windsocks, frozen in a permanent flinch. The wind also plays tricks with sound. Inside the cab, the roar can be deafening. It whistles through the door seals, shrieks around the mirrors, and drums against the fiberglass fairings. It sounds like the truck is being torn apart. You turn the radio up, but you can still hear the gale screaming outside, demanding to be let in. There is a psychological toll to this. After fighting the wind for an hour, your arms ache, your neck is stiff, and your eyes are dry from staring so intently at the white lines. You develop a wind sense. You watch the grass on the side of the road. If the grass is laying flat, you brace yourself. You watch the truck ahead of you. If his trailer wiggles, you know the gust is 1 second away from hitting you. The infrastructure tries to help. There are digital signs now that flash high wind warning. Trucks use extreme caution. But the best indicator is the tumbleweed. Yes, the classic Western movie tumbleweed, technically the Russian thistle, is real, and in the Cajon Pass they are missiles. During a storm, thousands of these dry, thorny bushes detach from their roots and race across the highway. They get stuck in your grille, blocking the radiator airflow. They get caught in the brake lines. Hitting a giant tumbleweed at night is a startling experience. It explodes into a cloud of dust and sticks, momentarily blinding you. It adds a layer of chaotic absurdity to the already dangerous drive. One human element that is often overlooked is the tow truck operators. These are the brave souls who have to go out into the teeth of the gale to recover the fallen giants. Imagine trying to hook up a heavy wrecker to an overturned semi while the wind is trying to blow you off your feet and sand is scouring your face. They are the unsung heroes of the pass, the ones who clear the arteries so the blood of commerce can flow again. There is also the phenomenon of the lens cloud. Sometimes, before the winds start, you will see a smooth, saucer-shaped cloud hovering over the mountains. It looks like a UFO. It's a standing wave cloud formed by the air oscillating over the peaks. To a local, that cloud is a warning flag raised by the atmosphere. It says, "Batten down the hatches." As we drive through tonight, the wind is moderate, just a steady buffeting that requires a firm hand on the wheel at the 10 and 2 o'clock positions. You can feel the suspension working, the cab swaying gently on its airbags. It's a reminder that we are moving through a fluid. The air is as much a part of the terrain as the granite. The wind cleans the pass, in a way. It scours the smog out of the basin and pushes it out to sea, leaving the air crystal clear. The view of the stars on a windy night in the high desert is spectacular, provided you can stand outside without getting blown over. We are passing the area of Devore now, where the I-15 and I-215 split. The wind often accelerates here, channeling through the split in the hills. We keep our speed unchecked but manageable. We are heavy tonight, which is good. Weight is stability. If we were empty, we'd be white-knuckling it in the slow lane with the hazard lights flashing. The devil winds are the breath of the desert, exhaling after a long, hot summer. They are a force of nature that cannot be tamed, only endured. And for the truck driver, they are a constant companion in the Cajon Pass, a respectful adversary that demands we keep 2 hands on the wheel and 1 eye on the windsock. But the wind isn't the only thing checking our progress. Up ahead, the flow of traffic is slowing. The brake lights are bunching up. We're approaching a different kind of checkpoint, one made of concrete and scales, where the laws of man take precedence over the laws of nature. The way station is open. The wind buffet settles slightly as the canyon walls widen, but the tension in the cab ticks up a notch. Up ahead, suspended over the highway like a glowing eye of judgment, is a digital sign. For miles, every driver has been glancing at it, hoping for the benevolent message, "Closed." But tonight the universe, or rather the California Highway Patrol, is not in a merciful mood. The sign burns with a stark amber command. Way station open, all trucks must enter. You can see the brake lights rippling through the convoy, the aggressive lane changes stop. The chatter on the CB radio dries up, replaced by a collective, unspoken holding of breath. We are approaching the Cajon platform scales, one of the busiest and most technologically advanced commercial vehicle enforcement facilities in the United States. To a civilian in a four-wheeler, a way station is just a place where trucks go to create traffic jams. To us, it is a border crossing, a courthouse, and a pop quiz all rolled into one. Even if your logbook is perfect, your tyres are new, and your load is balanced to the ounce, your heart rate spikes. It's the cop in the rearview mirror effect. multiplied by 80,000 pounds. The Cajon scales are strategically placed. The southbound facility catches the heavy freight barreling down from the high desert towards the Los Angeles basin. If you have bad brakes or a shifted load, this is the last safety net before you hit the dense urban traffic below. As we deseal into the long exit lane, we cross the first line of defence, the way-in-motion whim sensors embedded in the asphalt. These are piezoelectric strips, essentially pressure-sensitive crystals that generate an electrical charge when compressed. As we roll over them at highway speeds, they measure each axle's weight and the spacing between them. A computer instantly calculates our gross weight and checks it against the Federal Bridge formula. It's invisible, split-second math. Mounted on the windshield is our transponder, a little plastic box about the size of a deck of cards. This is the pre-pass system. It's communicating with the overhead reader on the gantries. It's asking a digital question. Am I cleared to bypass? In the cab, the transponder blinks. A green light and a happy beep mean you've been pre-screened and can skip the line. A red light and a sad buzz mean you are pulled in. Tonight, the little box gives us the red light. Maybe it's a random check. Maybe we're a few £100 heavy on the drive axles. Maybe the computer just wants to say hello. We drift right, joining the queue of steel giants trudging up the ramp. The atmosphere inside the scale complex is distinct. It's brightly lit with industrial sodium vapour or LED floodlights that wash everything in a sterile, high-contrast glow. It feels like a prison yard or a nocturnal construction site. The engines idle low, a chorus of diesel clatter. You can hear the shh of air. Brakes as the line inches forward. This is a place of judgment. The speed limit drops to 5 km/h. You have to be precise. You watch the truck in front of you, a rusted grain hauler from the Central Valley. He rolls onto the static scale plate. The traffic light turns red. He stops. The scale master inside the glass booth looks at a monitor. A moment passes. The light turns green. He rolls off. Now it's our turn. We ease the clutch out, crawling forward in first gear. You have to position the truck perfectly. The steer axle goes on the first plate, thump. The drive axle's on the second, thump, thump. The trailer tandem's on the third, thump, thump. You shift to neutral and wait. Inside the coupe, trucker slang for the scale house, an officer from the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division is looking at us. They aren't just looking at the weight readout, they are looking at the truck. Is there a headlight out? Is the registration current? Does the driver look fatigued, nervous, or, heaven forbid, under the influence? They are trained observers. They can spot a cracked frame rail or a leaking hub seal from 50 feet away. The human element here is a strange dance of submission and authority. You sit in your seat, hands visible on the steering wheel, trying to look professional and awake. You don't wave unless they wave first. You don't look suspicious, whatever that means. You just exist, hoping to be invisible. There is a speaker system, usually crackling with static. "Driver, bring your paperwork inside," is the sentence no one wants to hear. That means a level 2 or level 3 inspection. It means parking the truck, grabbing your permit book and your digital log device, and walking into the office to have your life audited. But tonight, the speaker remains silent. The officer in the booth, a silhouette against the bank of monitors, simply hits a button. The traffic light on the pole turns green. The arrow points back to the freeway. The relief is physical. Your shoulders drop 2 inches. You put the truck back in gear and roll off the scale. But you aren't out of the woods until you pass the barn. The barn is the inspection bay, a large covered shed where the real nightmares happen. This is where they conduct level 1 inspections. That involves the officer getting on a creeper and rolling under your truck. They measure the pushrod travel on your brake chambers. They check for chafed air lines. They look for oil leaks. If they find a critical violation, you get the dreaded out-of-service sticker. That sticker is the scarlet letter of trucking. It means you cannot move the vehicle until a mechanic comes out to fix it. You're stranded in the scale lot, losing money, losing time, and destroying your safety score. You see trucks parked over there in the penalty box, curtains drawn, drivers likely asleep or angrily on the phone with dispatch. It's a graveyard of schedules. There is a law to the Cajon scales. Old-timers will tell you about the days before computers when the lines would back up onto the freeway for miles. They'll tell you about the scale house shuffle, where drivers would swap logbooks or adjust their sliding tandems, the movable wheels on the trailer, at the last second to redistribute weight. There's also the legend of the ghost truck, a phantom rig that supposedly rolls through the scale at 3 am, tripping the sensors but showing 0 weight on the display, and vanishing before it hits the exit ramp. Every way station has a ghost story. It's the only way to make the bureaucracy interesting. One technical detail that fascinates the geeks is the creeper gear. Modern automated transmissions often have a special ultra-low gear mode specifically for this crawl. It keeps the clutch fully engaged at 2 or 3 miles per hour, so you don't burn it up slipping it in the queue. It's a feature designed almost exclusively for traffic jams and way stations. As we bypass the inspection bays, we see a flatbed driver tightening his straps. The officer probably told him a load securement strap was loose. He's out there in the cold wind, cranking on the winch bar. It's a reminder that the job is physical. The scale isn't just about punishment. Technically, it's about keeping a 40,000-pound coil of steel from flying off and crushing a minivan. We begrudgingly admit they serve a purpose, even if we hate them. The exit ramp from the scale is a runway. You have to get back up to highway speed before merging with the traffic that never had to stop. The turbo whistles as we demand full power. We are heavy, and the merge lane is uphill. It's a struggle. You watch the mirror, looking for a gap in the stream of headlights. You signal, pray, and push. Once we are back in the flow, the cab feels different. It feels like a sanctuary again. We have passed the test. We have been weighed, measured, and found sufficient. The sheer volume of data processed at the Cajon scales is staggering. Thousands of trucks a day. The ground beneath the station is likely more compacted than any other spot in California, just from the relentless pounding of axles. It is a choke point within a choke point. There is a hierarchy of way stations in the driver's mind. Some are known as sleepy, easygoing, rarely open. Others, like Cajon, are hot. They are known for strict enforcement. There are apps now, like Trucker Path, where drivers report the status of the scale in real time. Cajon southbound is open and inspecting, a user will post. Clean your lights and log it right. It's a digital community warning system, a modern version of flashing your high beams to warn of a speed trap. But the most interesting thing about the scale is the silence of the aftermath. Once you pass it, you don't talk about it. It's in the rear view. The anxiety evaporates, replaced immediately by the next concern, the fuel level, the delivery appointment, the next grade. Tonight, we were lucky. Or maybe we were just good. The pre-pass box goes back to sleep. The logbook remains checked but unexamined. We are just another data point in the state's server, a blip that registered £78,400 and moved on. As we leave the bright lights of the enforcement zone behind, the darkness of the wash returns. The contrast is jarring. Your eyes have to readjust to the night. The red taillights of the truck ahead, the grain hauler who also passed, are a comforting beacon. We are back in the pack. However, not everyone makes it through cleanly, and not everyone makes it down the hill safely. The scale catches the mechanical faults it can see, but it can't see the future. It can't predict when a brake line will snap or a driver will misjudge a curve 3 miles down the road. We have cleared the legal hurdle, but the physical danger of the pass is still present. We are approaching the infamous Runaway ramps. We saw them earlier as scars on the landscape, but now we need to understand them. They are the emergency exits of the highway, the last resort when the machine betrays the man. And to understand them, we have to understand the terrifying anatomy of a brake failure. The way station is fading in the mirrors, a cluster of authoritarian lights swallowed by the dark. We are back on the open grade, and while the legal inspection is over, the mechanical test continues. We spoke earlier about the heat, the enemy of friction, but now we must confront the ultimate consequence of losing that battle. We are entering the territory of the Runaway. If you drive with your window cracked on a steep descent like the Cajon, you will eventually smell it. It is a sharp, acrid odour, chemically distinct from the oily scent of diesel exhaust or the earthy smell of sage. It smells like burning resin and hot metal. It is the scent of brake pads dying. That smell is a distress signal. It means somewhere ahead of us, or perhaps right next to us, a driver is in trouble. Let's dissect the anatomy of a brake failure. It is rarely a sudden explosion or a snapped cable like in the movies. In the real world of heavy haulage, failure is a slow creeping paralysis known as brake fade. As we discussed, air brakes work by forcing a brake shoe against a metal drum. Under normal conditions, this friction stops the truck, but friction creates heat. On a grade like this, if a driver rides the brake pedal too hard, known as snubbing too frequently or simply holding steady pressure, the temperature of the drums can skyrocket to over 1000 degrees Fahrenheit. Here is the technical betrayal. Metal expands when it gets hot. The brake drum is a circle. As it heats up, that circle gets bigger. It expands away from the brake shoes. The driver pushes the pedal, but the shoes have to travel further to make contact. The pedal feels mushy. The driver pushes harder. The air system delivers maximum pressure, but the geometry is all wrong. Simultaneously, the heat causes a chemical reaction in the lining of the brake shoe. The resin that bonds the friction material together begins to vaporize. It creates a thin layer of superheated gas between the shoe and the drum. It's like an air hockey table. The brake shoe is literally floating on a cushion of gas sliding frictionlessly against the drum. This is the glassy feeling. The driver is standing on the pedal with all their weight. The air gauges show full application, but the truck is accelerating. 45 mph becomes 50. 50 becomes 60. The Jake brake is screaming, but at this speed the engine's resistance is overwhelmed by the sheer momentum of the load. Panic sets in. It's a cold, primal fear. The cab shakes violently as the speed increases. The steering becomes light. The driver checks the mirrors and sees the telltale blue-grey smoke pouring from the trailer wheels, the physical manifestation of the linings burning up. This is where the highway engineers step in. This is why we have the Runaway truck ramps. In the Cajon Pass, these ramps are massive, distinct features carved into the landscape. You've probably seen them. Long gravel chutes that veer off the main highway, usually heading uphill. They look like off-ramps to nowhere, but to a driver with no brakes, they are the only off-ramp that matters. The technology of the ramp is fascinatingly simple, yet precise. It relies on a specific type of aggregate known as pea gravel. This isn't just random dirt piled up. The stones are small, rounded and uniform, usually about the size of a marble. They're clean, washed of any sand or clay. Why round stones? Because round stones don't pack. They don't lock together like jagged, crushed rock. When a heavy wheel hits a bed of deep pea gravel, the stones roll over each other. They behave almost like a fluid. The truck tyres sink. The gravel engulfs the wheels, dragging on the axles, the differentials, and the fuel tanks. It creates a massive amount of rolling resistance. It is a violent, chaotic arrest. Imagine hitting a pool of water at 80 miles per hour, but the water is made of rock. The deceleration is brutal. A truck hitting a gravel ramp can go from highway speed to a dead stop in a matter of seconds. The G-forces are intense. Cargo inside the trailer will shift, often bursting through the front bulkhead. The driver is thrown against the seatbelt, dust explodes into the air, a mushroom cloud of pulverized stone. But the truck stops, and the driver lives. The history of these ramps is relatively modern. In the early days of trucking, a runaway meant you rode it out until you crashed or found a flat spot. The first dedicated arrestor beds began appearing in the western United States in the 1960s and 70s as truck weights increased and the interstate system carved through steeper terrain. The design we see in the Cajon Pass, the ascending grade ramp, is the gold standard. It uses both gravity, going uphill, and the gravel drag to stop the vehicle. There is a profound psychological threshold a driver must cross to take the ramp. It's the point of no return. Taking the ramp is an admission of failure. It means the load will likely be damaged. The truck will be buried to the axles. It will require an expensive, specialized tow job to get out. There will be an investigation. The driver might lose their job, so drivers hesitate. They think, maybe I can save it. Maybe the brakes will cool down. Maybe I can ride it out. That hesitation is deadly. The ramp is designed to be taken before the speed becomes uncontrollable, not when you're already doing 100 mph. If you look closely at the entrance to the ramps in the Cajon Pass, you'll see the tyre marks. Black rubber streaks on the asphalt, weaving, twitching. Those are the signatures of indecision. There is a famous story among local recovery crews about a driver who took the ramp near the bottom of the pass in the late 90s. He hit the gravel perfectly, straight down the centre. The truck ploughed in, burying itself up to the bumper. The driver opened the door, stepped out onto the gravel, which is like walking in a ball pit, and simply sat down and lit a cigarette. He didn't say a word for 20 minutes. The adrenaline dump had left him speechless. He had stared death in the face and death had blinked thanks to a pile of rocks. Recovering a truck from a runaway ramp is a logistical nightmare. You can't just hook a chain to it and pull. The resistance that stopped the truck is now holding it hostage. Tow operators have to dig out the wheels by hand or with machinery. They often have to use rotators, massive cranes, to lift the truck slightly while winching it backwards. It can take hours. And all the while, traffic on the interstate is rubbernecking, watching the spectacle. The ramps require maintenance too. After a truck uses one, the gravel is contaminated. It's crushed, compacted, and mixed with oil or fuel. The Department of Transportation has to come out, rake the bed, fluff the gravel back up to ensure it's loose for the next victim, and sometimes replace the stone entirely. The ramp has to be reset like a mousetrap. We are passing one of the ramps now. It sits on the right, a long, menacing strip of grey stone flanked by concrete barriers. It looks dormant tonight. There are no fresh tracks, no buried rigs. It is a silent sentinel waiting for a mechanical tragedy. There is a variation of the ramp technology called the dragnet system. Used in some places where there isn't room for a long gravel chute, it uses a series of metal nets attached to energy-absorbing spools of steel tape, like the arresting gear on an aircraft carrier. But in the vast open spaces of the Cajon Pass, the gravel bed reigns supreme. It is primitive, reliable, and effective. The signage leading up to the ramps is crucial. Runaway truck ramp 1 mile. Check brakes. These signs are shouted in large reflective font. They are trying to pierce the fog of panic that descends on a driver in trouble. They are saying, "There is a way out, don't die." As we glide past, safe in our controlled descent, the Jake brake purring obediently, we feel a strange mix of gratitude and dread. We are grateful the ramp is there and we dread ever needing it. It represents the limit of our control. It is the safety net that catches us when the machine fails. The existence of the ramp changes the way you drive. It's a visual reminder of the stakes. Every time you see that gravel chute, you check your air pressure gauge. You glance at the mirror for smoke. You respect the grade a little bit more. The worst part of the runaway scenario isn't the ramp itself. It's the runaway truck lane that sometimes precedes it. In the frantic moments before hitting the gravel, a driver has to navigate across traffic. Imagine being in the left lane, passing a slow truck when your brakes fail. You have to get to the right across 3 lanes of oblivious cars to hit the ramp. It requires aggressive, terrifying maneuvering. That's why the smart drivers stay right, close to salvation. We are nearing the bottom of the steeper section now. The smell of hot brakes from other trucks is dissipating, replaced by the cooler, damper air of the valley floor. The threat of the runaway recedes. The gravel ramps are behind us, receding into the darkness like sleeping giants. But the journey through the Cajon Pass isn't just about gravity and brakes. As we descend into the flatlands, we are joining a massive synchronized movement. We are becoming a drop in a very large ocean of commerce. The individual struggle of the hill is over. The collective flow of the logistics chain is about to begin. We are entering the river of cargo. The descent softens. The aggressive tug of gravity fades into a gentle forward momentum. The engine brake goes silent, its job done, replaced by the steady, rhythmic thrum of tyres on concrete. We have survived the drop, avoided the gravel pits of the runaway ramps, and now we are merging into something far larger than a single mountain pass. We are entering the basin, the sprawling, grid-like valley of the Inland Empire. From up high, it looked like a carpet of lights. Down here, at ground level, it looks like a machine. We are swimming in the river of cargo. If you look around the highway now, the composition of the traffic has changed. Up on the hill, it was a mix of everyone. Down here, near the intersection of the I-15 and the I-10, it is a sea of white rectangles. 53-foot dry vans, 40-foot corrugated steel containers, refrigerated reefer units, humming with their own diesel engines. We are surrounded by the physical manifestation of the global economy. This region, San Bernardino, Ontario, Fontana, is one of the largest logistics hubs on the planet. It is the warehouse of America. If you bought a toaster, a pair of sneakers, or a flat-pack bookshelf in the last 10 years, there is a very high probability it spent some time sitting in a warehouse within 10 miles of where we are driving right now. The flow is hydraulic in nature. Imagine the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach about 60 miles to the southwest as the headwaters. Massive container ships carrying 20,000 TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units, apiece, dock there and unload their burden. That cargo has to go somewhere. The port is too small to hold it all, so it flows inland, flooding up the 710 freeway, spilling onto the 60 and the 10, and pooling here, in the vast, flat concrete basin at the foot of the Cajon Pass. The warehouses line the highway like canyon walls. They are massive tilt-up concrete structures covering millions of square feet. At night, they glow with an eerie, green-white industrial light. You can see the rows of loading docks, dozens of them per building looking like hungry mouths. Trucks are backed into them, swallowed halfway, feeding the building or being fed. This is the domain of intermodal freight. That's the industry term for moving goods using multiple modes of transport, ship, train and truck, without handling the freight itself. The steel container is the universal currency here. It's a Lego brick of commerce. Let's look at a specific piece of technology that makes this river flow, the container chassis. You'll see them everywhere down here. Skeletal trailers that look like steel spines. They are stripped down to the bare essentials: a frame, axles, lights, and twist locks. The twist lock is the critical linkage. It's a heavy steel pin on the corner of the chassis that fits into a slot on the container. Once the crane drops the box onto the chassis, the driver, or the crane operator, twists a lever, rotating the head of the pin inside the container's casting, locking it in place. But here's the gritty reality. Chassis are the orphans of the trucking world. They are often owned by leasing pools, not the drivers, and they are shared, swapped, and abused. Finding a good chassis at a rail yard is a treasure hunt. Drivers carry zip ties and duct tape to fix flickering taillights. They kick the tyres, hoping they aren't bald. They crank the landing gear, the metal legs that hold up the front, hoping the gears aren't stripped. The sound of a rusted landing gear screaming as you try to crank it up is the soundtrack of the intermodal yards. The drivers here are different too. Up on the pass we saw the long haulers, the over-the-road OTR knights living in their sleeper cabs for weeks at a time. Down here the river is populated by drayage drivers. These are the day cab warriors. Their trucks don't have sleepers, just a back window. They run the short, repetitive loops. Port to warehouse, warehouse to rail yard to warehouse. It's a grueling, high-pressure gig. They are paid by the load, not the mile, which means time is literally money. They drive with a frantic urgency, darting through traffic, fighting the queues at the terminal gates. You can spot a drayage truck easily. It's often an older rig, maybe with a few battle scars on the bumper, pulling a mismatched container that has travelled around the world 3 times. The container might say a Maersk, or Costco, or Evergreen, bearing the salt spray rust of the Pacific Ocean. The sheer volume is staggering. We're talking about millions of containers a year moving through this corridor. The Cajon Pass is the northern escape valve for this pressure. The goods that don't stay in the local warehouses have to go east, to Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Denver, and beyond. That means they have to go up the hill we just came down, or the one we were about to climb if we were heading north. There is a fascinating logistical concept at play here called the land bridge. It's often faster to ship goods from Asia to California and then put them on a train or truck to New York, rather than sailing the ship all the way through the Panama Canal. The Cajon Pass is a crucial link in that land bridge. The railroad tracks we saw earlier paralleling the highway are the steel version of this river, carrying double-stacked containers endlessly eastward. Tonight, the river is flowing smoothly, but it can jam. A single accident near the I-15-I-215 split can cause a backup that ripples all the way back to the port. When the river stops, the supply chain shudders. Factories in Ohio run out of parts. Store shelves in Chicago go empty. It's a fragile system, dependent on the constant rotation of 18 wheels. The warehouses themselves are marvels of automation. Inside those glowing concrete boxes, robots are often doing the picking. Kiva systems, little orange bots, scurry around, moving shelves to human packers. But outside in the yard, it's still diesel and sweat. The shag driver, or yard dog, is another character in this play. These are the drivers who operate the terminal tractors, those funny-looking single-seat trucks with a sliding glass door and a hydraulic lift for the 5th wheel. They never leave the warehouse property. Their entire job is to move trailers from a parking spot to a dock door and back again. They move hundreds of trailers a shift, whipping them around in reverse with a precision that would make a Formula One driver jealous. They are the tugboats of this asphalt ocean. As we cruise through the valley, the air is thick, not just with smog, but with dust. The constant movement of heavy tyres grinds the pavement into a fine powder. It coats the trucks, the guardrails, and the palm trees. It's the industrial pollen of the Inland Empire. We pass a massive truck stop, the Petro or the TA in Ontario. It's a city within a city. Acres of parking, a mechanic shop that never closes, a buffet that serves fried chicken at 4 a.m. Inside, the drivers are washing off the road grime, doing laundry, or staring at their phones, connecting with families thousands of miles away. It's a transient community, a floating village of nomads who share the same road but rarely know each other's names. The scale of the parking lots at the distribution centres is hard to comprehend until you drive past one at night. Row after row of trailers, hundreds of them, parked with military precision. In the dark, they look like sleeping dominoes. Some are empty, waiting for a load. Some are loaded, waiting for a driver. Their inventory in transit, money sitting on rubber tyres. There is a rhythm to this river. The just-in-time delivery model means that the warehouse doesn't want the inventory sitting there for long. They want it in and out. The truck is the rolling warehouse. That's why we're driving at night. The freight doesn't sleep. The connection between the geology we saw earlier and this industrial sprawl is direct. The flat valley floor, filled with sediment washed down from the mountains over millions of years, provided the perfect flat foundation for these massive buildings. The pass provided the route. The fault lines created the geography that controls the economy. Driving in this traffic requires a different mindset. Up on the hill, it was man against mountain. Here, it is man against the herd. You have to watch for the cutoff. A car realizes their exit is 50 feet away and dives across 3 lanes, right in front of your bumper. You have to anticipate the merge. You have to guard your space cushion. It's a high-stress environment, but there is a beauty to the efficiency of it. When it works, it's a ballet of heavy machinery. The container leaves the ship, hits the chassis, gets pulled by the drayage driver to the rail yard, rides the train up the Cajon Pass, gets picked up by a long-haul driver in Chicago, and ends up at a store. It's a relay race passing a baton that weighs 20 tons. We are just one cell in this organism. Our load, whatever it is we're imagining tonight, maybe auto parts, maybe frozen chicken, is just one drop in the river. We flow with the current, guided by the white lines and the GPS. But the inland empire isn't just concrete and cargo. As we push through the congestion, heading back towards the open road, or perhaps finding our own place to park, we have to remember the extremes of this place. We've talked about the heat and the wind. But the Cajon Pass has a colder, whiter trick up its sleeve. It's easy to forget, sitting here in the valley warmth, surrounded by palm trees and pavement, that the pass climbs to over 4,000 feet. And when the Pacific storms collide with that cold high desert air, the result isn't rain, it's chaos. The river of cargo can freeze. We're about to explore the paradox of the desert winter. The snow chains are rattling in the side box, waiting for their moment. The ice is waiting on the bridges. The river is moving now, but when the white stuff falls, the river stops. And when the river stops in the Cajon Pass, the silence is deafening. As we cruise through the valley floor, the ambient temperature sensor on the dash reads a comfortable 60 degrees. The palm trees lining the industrial parks are swaying gently, and the memory of the mountain's chill seems miles away. But if you look in the side box of any veteran driver's truck, including this one, you'll find a set of heavy, rusted canvas bags. Inside are loops of hardened steel chain. They're a mandatory accessory, a heavy, clanking insurance policy against the Cajon Pass's most deceptive trick, the desert winter. It seems like a contradiction in terms. The Mojave is famous for heat, for mirages, for radiators boiling over. But elevation changes everything. We just dropped over 4,000 feet. Up there at the summit, the atmosphere is thin and the air is brittle. When a Pacific storm front crashes into the San Gabriel Mountains in January or February, it doesn't bring a refreshing drizzle. It brings snow. And it brings it with a violence that catches the uninitiated completely off guard. The Grapevine to the north gets all the press for snow closures, but the Cajon Pass is arguably more treacherous because of the traffic mix. You have thousands of drivers who have lived their entire lives in Los Angeles, people who have never seen snow outside of a movie screen, suddenly finding themselves driving on a sheet of ice at 4,000 feet. The chaos usually starts with the chain control signs. You'll see the amber lights flashing miles before the grade begins. Chains required on all single-axle vehicles. Then, as the storm intensifies, chains required on all vehicles except 4WD. And finally, the message that makes every trucker's stomach drop: maximum chains required. trucks must chain up. This is where the chain bank comes into play. We passed these areas on our descent, wide paved shoulders that looked like deserted parking strips. In a storm, they are scenes of industrial misery. Imagine the scene. It's 2:06 a.m. The wind is howling at 40 miles per hour, driving sleet sideways. The ground is a slurry of grey slush, mud, and unidentifiable road grime. You pull into the chain bank, the truck rocking in the gusts. You have to get out. You have to leave the warm cocoon of the cab and step into the freezer. Chaining up is a physical wrestling match. A single triple rail chain for a set of dual tyres weighs about 100 pounds. It's a tangled mess of cold iron. You have to drag it out of the side box, shake it out, which sounds like a jailbreak, and drape it over the tyres. The technical nuance here is the cam. Modern chains have little cam locks built into the side rails. You use a specialised L key to turn them, tightening the chain against the rubber. But before you get to that, you have to get the chain centred. You drape it, roll the truck forward a foot, hoping the chain doesn't fall off, and then hook the inside latch. This is the worst part. To hook the inside latch on, a set of duals, you have to practically hug the tyre. You're on your knees in the slush, reaching your arms into the dark, wet wheel well, fumbling for a hook you can't see, while freezing water drips down the back of your neck. Your fingers go numb in seconds. It's a moment where you question every life choice that led you to a commercial driver's license, and you aren't doing this alone. You're surrounded by 200 other drivers doing the same thing. The air is filled with the sounds of metal clanking, engines idling, and a creative variety of profanity in 5 different languages. There is a grim camaraderie, a shared suffering. Sometimes you'll see a driver helping a rookie who is struggling to get his tensioners right. "Hey driver, you got that inside rail twisted," a voice will shout over the wind. It's the brotherhood of the frozen knuckle. Once the chains are on, the driving experience changes completely. You're no longer gliding, you're rumbling. The speed limit for chains is usually 25 to 30 miles per hour. The truck vibrates violently. Clink, clunk, clink, clunk, clink, clunk. It's a bone-jarring rhythm. If a link breaks, which happens, it becomes a steel whip, flailing around in the wheel well, ripping out airlines, mud flaps and brake chambers. You drive with one ear cocked, listening for the distinctive slap, slap, slap of a broken crosslink. But the snow isn't the real enemy. The real enemy is the ice, specifically black ice. This forms when the snow melts during the day and then refreezes into a translucent glaze as the sun sets. It looks exactly like wet asphalt. You can't see it until you feel the steering wheel go light, floating in your hands like it's disconnected. The bridges are the first to freeze. We crossed several large bridges near the summit. Because cold air circulates underneath the bridge deck, the road surface there drops below freezing much faster than the road on solid ground. You can be driving on wet pavement with good traction, hit a bridge, and instantly be on a skating rink. This is where these no tourists become a hazard. This is a uniquely Southern California phenomenon. When snow falls in the Cajon Pass, families from the valley load up their sedans and drive up the interstate to see the snow. They pull over on the shoulders, sometimes partially blocking the lanes to build snowmen and have snowball fights. To a truck driver trying to navigate a slippery grade with 80,000 pounds of momentum, these pedestrians are terrifying. They wander near the fog line, oblivious to the fact that a sliding semi cannot stop. The highway patrol spends half their time chasing people back into their cars. It adds a layer of surrealism to the danger, dodging a snowball fight while trying to keep a tractor trailer from jackknifing. There was a massive event in late 2019, right around Thanksgiving, that locals still talk about. A bomb cyclone hit the region. The snow level dropped to 2,000 feet. The Cajon Pass was buried. Interstate 15 was shut down in both directions for over 24 hours. When the pass closes, the impact is seismic. It's not just traffic, it's a logistical heart attack. Thousands of trucks were stranded. The truck stops in Hesperia and Ontario overflowed instantly. Trucks were parked on the on-ramps, off-ramps, and side streets for miles. Inside those cabs, the human element of survival kicked in. Drivers have food and water usually, but heat requires fuel. If you run out of diesel while idling to stay warm, you're in trouble. During the big shutdowns, you see the community mobilize, people walking from truck to truck checking on each other. You good on water? Need a sandwich? And then there is the cleanup. Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, operates a fleet of massive snowplows based in the mountains. Seeing a convoy of orange plows moving in echelon formation, blades sparking against the pavement clearing the I-15 is a powerful sight. They push the snow to the side, creating berms that can last for weeks in the shadowed cuts of the canyon. We also have to mention the cinders. In the Cajon Pass, they don't just use salt, they use volcanic cinders, red, gritty, crushed rock to provide traction. It works, but it's messy. After a storm, your truck is coated in a pinkish-grey paste. It gets into everything. It blasts the paint off your bumper. A truck that has survived a Cajun winter carries the scars on its nose, a pitted, sand-blasted testament to the grit. Driving the pass the morning after a storm is arguably the most beautiful the canyon ever looks. The ugly scrub brush is hidden under a pristine white blanket. The Joshua trees look like Dr. Seuss characters wearing snow hats. The sky is a piercing, impossible blue. The air is so clean it hurts your lungs. You drive through this winter wonderland, your chains draped over the hanger rack now, the road wet but clear. You see the abandoned cars on the shoulder, the ones that didn't make it, nose down in a ditch or spun around facing the wrong way. They are the casualties of the night. You nod to them, a silent acknowledgement of the battle. The winter in Cajon is a reminder that this is high country. It's easy to look at a map and see California and think beach, but the truckers know better. We know that between the beach and the desert lies a jagged wall of rock that creates its own weather. As we continue our journey through the valley tonight, the road is dry. The only ice is in the cooler under the bunk. But looking at the calendar, or just feeling that subtle drop in temperature as the night deepens, we know the season is turning. The chains are in the box. The heavy coat is in the closet, the mountain is waiting. But for now, the threat is different. It's not the weather, it's the fatigue. We have navigated the geology, the history, the traffic, and the elements. Now we have to navigate the internal clock. The adrenaline of the descent is wearing off, and the hypnotic rhythm of the highway lights is taking over. It's the graveyard shift, the time when the shadows lengthen and the mind starts to play tricks. The adrenaline of the chain-up areas and the white-knuckle descent has washed away, replaced by the steady rhythmic hum of the graveyard shift. It is the deep hours of the morning now, that ambiguous time between late night and early morning, when the world seems to hold its breath. We are moving through the shadows and lights, the atmospheric coda to our journey through the Cajon Pass. The traffic has thinned out significantly. The frantic four-wheelers and the aggressive drayage trucks have largely parked for the night. What remains is a skeleton crew of long haulers, the diehards pushing for a dawn delivery in Los Angeles or a morning slot in Salt Lake City. We are a sparsely populated convoy, a string of red rubies moving through the dark. Driving at this hour changes the geography. You can't see the mountains anymore, the massive tectonic plates, the towering cliffs of Blue Cut, the sweeping vistas of the valley. They are all swallowed by the void. All that exists is the cone of illumination cast by your headlights. This brings us to a specific technical element of modern trucking, the evolution of forward lighting. In the old days, sealed beam halogen headlights cast a warm, yellowish glow that faded softly at the edges. They were comforting, but dim. Today, we run LEDs, or high-intensity discharge, or HID, xenons. They cast a light that is stark, clinical, and blue-white. It cuts through the dark with a razor-sharp cut-off line. Below the line, it's daylight. Above it, absolute black. This creates a tunnel vision effect. You are driving into a perpetual cave of your own making. The reflective markers on the road, the bots dots or the recessed reflectors embedded in the asphalt, explode with light as they hit the beam. They look like a runway approach, streaming toward you and disappearing under the hood. Zip, 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 zip. It is hypnotic. This visual rhythm leads to the phenomenon known as white line fever, or highway hypnosis. It's a trance state. Your conscious mind essentially disconnects from the task of driving. You might drive for 20 miles, shifting gears, maintaining lane position, checking mirrors, all with perfect precision, yet have no memory of doing it. The subconscious takes the wheel. It's the brain's way of conserving energy in a low-stimulus environment. To combat this, veteran drivers curate their cab environment carefully. The dashboard dimmer switch, the rheostat, is turned all the way down. You want the gauges to be just a faint ghostly glow, barely registering in your peripheral vision. A bright dashboard causes the pupils to constrict, ruining your night vision for the road outside. You want the cab to be a dark room. Outside the glass, the past takes on a different personality. Without the sun to bleach the landscape into flat reality, the shadows play tricks. This is the land of pareidolia, the psychological phenomenon where the brain forces random patterns into recognizable images. That jagged rock formation near the summit. In the daylight, it's just granite. At 3 a.m., as the headlights sweep across it, it looks like a crouching cougar. The twisted branches of a Joshua tree caught in the high beams look like a hitchhiker waving a tattered coat. The mind, starved of stimulation, starts to invent its own company. This region has a rich history of spook lights, or unexplained aerial phenomena. We are, after all, on the edge of the high desert, not far from the aerospace testing grounds and the lure of Area 51 further north. For decades, travellers through the Cajon Pass have reported seeing strange hovering lights in the foothills. Are they UFOs? Ghosts of the old pioneers? Or more likely, are they the headlights of off-roaders and illegal campers magnified by the atmospheric inversion layers we discussed earlier? There is a historical layer to these lights as well. In the 1920s, before radar and GPS, the US government built a system of transcontinental airmail routes. To guide the pilots flying open cockpit biplanes at night, they built massive concrete arrows on the ground, painted yellow. At the base of each arrow was a 50-foot steel tower with a rotating gaslit beacon. You can still find the remnants of these concrete arrows in the Mojave Desert. They are the ghosts of navigation, pointing the way for pilots who have been dead for 50 years. Sometimes when you see a solitary light blinking on a distant ridge, you wonder if it's a modern cell tower, or an echo of that old, slighted airway, still trying to guide a mail plane home through the pass. But the most important lights tonight are the ones we use to talk to each other. There is a complex, silent language spoken by truck drivers using only photons. It's a code of courtesy that has evolved over decades. Let's say we are overtaking a slower truck, perhaps a heavy tanker climbing the grade. We pull into the left lane. As our trailer clears his front bumper, we can't see exactly when it's safe to merge back over. We are relying on the other driver. When we are clear, the driver being passed will briefly interrupt his headlights, turning them off and on, or dimming them. Blink, blink. That is the signal. It says, "You're clear, driver, come on over." We merge back into the right lane. Then we reach for the marker interrupt switch on the steering wheel or dash. We blink our clearance lights, the amber and red lights outlining the truck and trailer. Blink, blink, blink. That means, thank you. Usually the other driver will flash his high beams once in response. You're welcome. It's a polite conversation held at 60 miles per hour between two strangers who will never meet. It breaks the isolation. It says, I see you, I've got your back. In the lonely stretch of the night, that connection is surprisingly meaningful. However, the darkness also hides the scars of the pass. We pass the locations of famous wrecks, without seeing them. The sharp curve where a runaway truck lost its load of steel pipes in the 90s, the ravine where a train derailed in the 80s. The darkness sanitizes the history, hiding the violence under a blanket of shadow. The soundscape of the night is different too. During the day, the noise is a chaotic wall of sound. At night, it separates. You can hear the distinct whine of a specific set of tires. You can hear the turbocharger of a truck half a mile away. Sometimes you hear the phantom of the CB. The Citizens band radio is mostly quiet these days, or filled with static. But occasionally, late at night, you catch a voice. It's usually a skip transmission, a signal bouncing off the ionosphere from hundreds of miles away. You might hear a guy in Texas talking about the rain, or a preacher in Alabama delivering a sermon. It drifts in, clear as a bell, for 10 seconds, and then fades back into the white noise. It feels like picking up a broadcast from another dimension. There is a specific spot on the descent near the escape ramp where the city lights of San Bernardino suddenly vanish behind a ridge, and for a few seconds you're in total darkness. No moon, no city glow, just the black cliffs. In that moment, the cab feels incredibly small. It's a submarine feeling. You're pressurized, warm, and encapsulated in a hostile environment. This is when the human element of reflection kicks in. The night shift is when you do your thinking. You think about the mortgage. You think about your kids' grades. You think about that argument you had 3 days ago. The road occupies your hands and your eyes, but your mind is free to wander the corridors of your own life. The Cajon Pass, with its repetitive curves and steady grade, is a catalyst for introspection. We also have to contend with the biological clock. The circadian rhythm is screaming that we should be asleep. The body temperature drops, the eyelids feel heavy, like they are made of lead. This is the danger zone. To fight it, we use sensory inputs. We crack the window an inch. The roar of the wind and the cold air snaps the brain to attention. We chew sunflower seeds. The act of cracking the shell and spitting it out keeps the jaw moving and the brain engaged. We turn the radio to a talk show, engaging the language centers of the brain, rather than music which can be lulling. As we near the bottom of the pass, the environment shifts again. The shadows of the natural world, the rocks and scrub, are replaced by the shadows of the industrial world. The silhouettes of the high-tension power lines, marching like iron giants across the hills, loom against the purple sky. The glow of the rail yard floodlights creates an artificial dawn to the east. We are transitioning from the wild dark to the urban dark. The cat's eyes on the road multiply, becoming a complex weave of lane markings. The overhead signs appear, reflective green rectangles floating in the void. Vor I-10 east-west, San Bernardino, Los Angeles. The shadows and lights section of the drive is ending. We have passed through the tunnel of the night. The headlights have carved a path through the geology and the history, and now they are illuminating the final stretch. The tension of the drive is almost gone, replaced by a heavy, satisfied fatigue. We have done the work, we have moved the freight. The ghost lights of the desert are behind us, and the steady amber glow of the destination is ahead. It is time to find a place to stop, time to let the turbo cool down, time to let the eyes rest from the glare of the bot's dots. The journey is nearly complete. We are gliding toward the final descent, not of the mountain, but of the day itself. The highway widens into a vast concrete delta. The intensity of the pass, the gravity, the wind, the blind curves, is now just a memory in the rearview mirror, receding into the darkness of the mountains we've conquered. We're gliding onto the valley floor of San Bernardino, the tension in the cab dissipating like heat from a cooling radiator. The grip on the steering wheel loosens from a white-knuckle clench to a relaxed, casual hold. We are entering the final phase of the logistics cycle, the arrival. To the left, looming high above the city lights on the face of the San Bernardino Mountains, is a ghost of geography that has guided travelers for centuries. It might be too dark to see clearly now, but we know it's there, the arrowhead. It's a massive natural rock formation, shaped perfectly like a downward-pointing arrowhead, created by the contrast of light quartz and dark soil and vegetation. The Cahuilla and Serrano people believed it was placed there by a spirit to guide them to the hot springs below. The Mormon pioneers we spoke of earlier saw it as a biblical sign confirming they had reached their destination. For us tonight, it's just a silent nod from the landscape. It marks the end of the struggle. It says, "You're down, you're safe." The exit ramp approaches. We signal right, the indicator clicking with a slow rhythmic metronome beat. Tick-tock, tick-tock. We bleed off speed, the speedometer needle dropping from 65 to 40, then 30. The sensation of speed is relative. After hours on the freeway, 30 miles per hour feels like crawling. We roll into the industrial outskirts. The environment here is utilitarian and stark. Warehouses, chain-link fences, and the occasional palm tree silhouetted against the amber streetlights. The road surface changes from smooth highway asphalt to the cracked, potholed concrete of the local surface streets. The suspension bumps and wheezes, the airbags adjusting to the uneven terrain. We are looking for a sanctuary. For a truck driver, home is a fluid concept. It's wherever the parking brake is set. Tonight we aren't heading to a house with a driveway. We are heading to the travel centre. Pulling into a truck stop at night is like entering a dormant hive. The lot is packed. Rows and rows of tractor trailers are parked shoulder to shoulder, a massive mosaic of chrome and steel. The running lights are mostly off, save for the occasional amber glow of a marker light. The dominant sound is the low, collective idle of hundreds of diesel engines and the hum of auxiliary power units, APUs, the small generators that keep the cabs warm and the batteries charged. Finding a spot is the final test of the night. You scan the rows, looking for a gap in the wall of metal. There near the back, between a red Peterbilt and a white Freightliner, is a slot. We line it up. This is the 45-degree back, the standard maneuver. We pull past the spot, swing the nose out and shift, into reverse. The backup alarm beeps, a sharp, piercing sound that cuts through the night air. Beep, beep, beep. We watch the mirrors. The trailer pivots. The tyres crunch on the gravel and oil-stained pavement. We slide into the slot with the precision of a key entering a lock. We check the mirrors one last time to make sure we are centred, respecting the white lines, giving our neighbours enough room to open their doors. We neutralise the transmission, and then comes the most satisfying sound in the trucking industry. We reach for the yellow diamond-shaped button on the dash, the tractor parking brake, and the red octagon button, the trailer air supply. We pull them both. Psh! Whoosh! The air dumps from the brake chambers. The springs expand, locking the shoes against the drums with thousands of pounds of force. The truck settles. You can feel the chassis physically relax, sinking slightly as the suspension airbags depressurize. The beast is tethered. But we don't kill the engine yet. A turbocharger that has been working hard climbing and descending the Cajon Pass is spinning at over 100,000 RPM and is incredibly hot. If you shut the engine off immediately, the oil flow stops, and the oil cokes, burns, inside the bearing housing, destroying the turbo. So, we let it idle. This is the cool down cycle. We sit there for 3 or 4 minutes listening to the engine note change from a working growl to a gentle, rhythmic clatter. It's a moment of decompression for the driver too. We finish the logbook, changing our status from driving to off-duty. We check the phone. We take a sip of water that has gone lukewarm. The gauges settle. The pyrometer, exhaust temperature, drops below 300 degrees. It's time. We turn the key to the left. The fuel injectors stop firing. The engine shudders once, a final shake of the frame, and then silence. The sudden absence of noise is shocking. The ringing in your ears becomes audible, a faint high-pitched whine from hours of wind noise and tyre hum. Slowly, the local sounds filter back in. The distant bark of a dog, the clack-clack of a cooling exhaust pipe contracting, the hum of a reefer unit 2 trucks down. We draw the curtains. The privacy curtain that wraps around the windshield creates a cocoon blocking out the floodlights of the parking lot. The world outside, the pass, the scales, the traffic, the wind, ceases to exist. We are now in a micro-apartment roughly 8 feet wide by 6 feet deep. We move from the driver's seat to the sleeper berth. It's a small space, but it's ours. The mattress is thick foam. There's a quilt we brought from home that smells like laundry detergent, a scent that cuts through the diesel fumes. We strip off the boots. The feeling of cool air on tired feet is exquisite. We stretch the back, hearing the spine pop, releasing the tension of holding that seated posture for 10 hours. This moment of lying down is the payoff. The body sinks into the mattress. The vibration of the road is still ghosting through your muscles. You feel like you're still moving, a phantom forward motion that takes a while to fade. We think back on the drive. We trace the route in our mind. The climb up the fault line, the ghosts of the mule teams in the dust, the neon memory of the Summit Inn, the terror of the Santa Ana winds, the judgment of the scales, the gravity of the descent. We have threaded the needle. We have brought the cargo safely through the choke point. The Cajon Pass is a harsh teacher, but it is also a faithful one. It has been there for millions of years, rising and grinding, and it will be there tomorrow night. The road we drove on is just a temporary scratch on its surface, a fleeting attempt by humans to tame the geography. But for tonight, we have won the truce. We reach up and click off the reading light. The darkness is total. The only light is the tiny red LED of the smoke detector blinking on the ceiling, a heartbeat in the dark. The sounds of the truck stop become a lullaby. The low rumble of idling engines is a form of white noise, a pink noise, actually, deep and consistent. It mimics the sound of the womb or the ocean. It is the sound of commerce sleeping. Sleep comes quickly for a driver. It's not a gentle drifting off. It's a heavy curtain falling. The exhaustion pulls you down. The worries about delivery times, traffic and dispatches dissolve. The pass is behind us. The grade is behind us. The load is safe. The brakes are cool. The engine is cold. We are just a traveller in the night resting by the side of the trail, just like the Tongva traders, the Spanish soldiers, and the Route 66 wanderers before us. We have crossed the divide. The engine has stopped its ticking. The metal has cooled. The heat of the journey has radiated away into the cool valley night, leaving only stillness in its wake. The great mountain behind us, the formidable wall of stone and scrub, continues its silent vigil. The wind is still blowing through the canyons, whistling through the Joshua trees and smoothing the sand over the old wagon tracks, but it cannot reach us here. The fault lines deep beneath the earth are sleeping, holding the world together for another night. You can let go of the steering wheel now, you can unclench your hands. There are no more curves to navigate, no more grades to climb, no more gusts to fight. The yellow lines and white lines have all led to this single quiet point of rest. Listen to the soft, steady rhythm of the night. The distant hum of the highway is just a memory, a soft murmur like the ocean far away. You are safe in the cabin, warm and sheltered. The cargo is secure, the journey is complete. Let your breathing slow down to match the idle of the sleeping giants around you. Slow, deep and steady. The road will be there tomorrow, waiting with its stories and its miles. But for now, the map is folded. The logbook is closed. The lights are out. Drift away from the asphalt and the concrete. Drift into the velvet dark where the only movement is the gentle rise and fall of your own chest. You have earned this peace. Sweet dreams.